3 years ago, Earth received a spiritual energy revival, giving 5 types of powers, and Shinji Fuji is already half dead when the betrayal finally sinks in. And yeah, his day is about to get considerably worse. This girl really just stabs our guy just to please the president. Then the other traitor steps beside her because apparently stabbing one man in the back was a group project. Imagine getting cornered by the president and his only 2 options are watch us do cardio or die instantly. Shinji is fighting for his life and his sanity. Getting stabbed by your girlfriend was bad enough, but using his head as a literal doormat is a level of disrespect Shinji might never recover from. They start laughing like there's no tomorrow. The president had enough and just pushed our boy off the building, just to feed a couple monsters, now making Shinji Fuji a nice supper for them. His final thoughts aren't even about revenge alone, because the companions who died with him are still weighing on his conscience. Rin's face becomes the symbol of every mistake he refuses to repeat. So Shinji makes one last promise. If fate ever gives him another chance, the people who used him are getting buried by their own choices. And apparently fate was listening, because the supreme cultivation system sends him straight back through time. Instead of dying, Shinji jolts awake on a familiar couch and immediately wonders how he could possibly be back here. The danger on his phone confirms it. He has returned to the past, before the spiritual energy revival transformed the world. A blue system window appears in front of him, proving the impossible rewind was real, and that whatever saved him came back too. For a second all he can do is stare, because this interface should not exist in the peaceful world around him yet. Then the shock turns into focus as the system begins showing him the functions and opportunities available in this new timeline. Nobody else has noticed it yet, but spiritual energy is already quietly recovering, and soon humans, animals, and plants will all begin changing. Rare spiritual fruits, strange weather, and supernatural phenomena will follow, and Shinji already knows how valuable those early resources are going to become. That future knowledge is his real advantage, because this time he knows what treasures appear before the rest of the world even understands what it is looking at. He opens the system's acquisition functions and starts checking what kind of power he can secure before the revival properly begins. The first major reward is a purple fire attribute crystal tied to the Brahma Raging Fire skill. Shinji holds the crystal in his palm almost in disbelief, because an ability this valuable was completely out of reach in his previous life. He crushes the crystal and absorbs it immediately instead of wasting even a second. Fire erupts around his body as the attribute takes hold, and Shinji finally feels supernatural power flowing through him years ahead of schedule. Once the surge settles, he walks away knowing his second life has already started on completely different terms. Later, while relaxing at home, his phone rings and drags him straight back to one of the people he least wants to deal with. Rin is on the other end asking him for money, but this time Shinji shuts her down instead of automatically doing whatever she wants. Inside a red car, Rin sits beside Yuto, completely thrown off by the sudden change in the man she thought she could control forever. She complains that Shinji is acting strangely because the old version of him would have folded the moment she called. Yuto brushes it off and keeps flirting with her, neither of them realizing Shinji remembers exactly what they become in the future. Their conversation continues on the road while Shinji has already moved on to something far more important at the hospital. He has been searching for Mika, and by the time he reaches another hospital, the running around has clearly worn him down. In his first life, Mika's body formed an unusual spiritual energy core, but she believed the strange conditions simply meant she was unlucky. This time Shinji refuses to let the same thing happen, promising that he will protect both Mika and the power awakening inside her. Inside the ward, the monitor suddenly spikes as her condition worsens faster than the medical staff expected. Doctors and nurses crowd around the bed, treating it like an ordinary medical emergency because nobody here understands spiritual awakening yet. Mika's terrified father begs Dr. Lee to save his daughter while the elderly physician moves in to check her pulse himself. The father explains that the symptoms began recently, giving Dr. Lee the history he needs before deciding how to treat her. Dr. Lee concludes that an extreme amount of yin energy has accumulated in Mika's body and proposes using yang-focused medicine to disperse it. Her father immediately accepts the prescription, desperate enough to trust the respected doctor with no reason to suspect anything supernatural. Before the treatment can begin, Shinji bursts through the door and tells everyone to wait. The room turns on him at once, with Mika's father asking whether this random young man is somehow one of Dr. Lee's apprentices. He is not, so the medical staff grab him and try dragging him out before he can interfere any further. Shinji fights the restraint long enough to warn them that the proposed treatment will not just hurt Mika's body, it could destroy her future. That stops Dr. Lee cold because Shinji has somehow recognized the ice attribute's spiritual energy inside Mika before the revival is even public knowledge. Shinji tells them that waking Mika safely means treating the spiritual imbalance itself, not forcing her body through the same ordinary procedure that failed in his previous life. Dr. Lee listens with the other physicians behind him, clearly wondering why some random young man is talking like he has already diagnosed the case. Instead of backing off, Shinji starts naming the exact medicinal ingredients they would need, including codonopsis as part of the prescription. That gets everyone's attention because the formula he gives is basically identical to the Eastern medicine prescription the staff had already prepared. Dr. Lee finally stops treating him like a reckless visitor and studies him with genuine suspicion. Shinji raises one finger and makes it clear there is still one crucial ingredient missing. The old physician waits for him to finish, now far more interested than he wants to admit. The younger doctors exchange nervous looks, because this kid somehow knows details he should have had no way of learning. Mika's father turns to Dr. Lee for an answer, desperate to know whether Shinji's strange prescription actually makes sense. The missing ingredient is the Stardew flower, a rare blue plant whose glowing pollen and powerful healing properties make it perfect for stabilizing Mika's condition. Dr. Lee recognizes the name immediately, and the problem is that a Stardew flower is so rare that you cannot just walk into a pharmacy and buy one. Shinji tells Mika's father not to panic, because if the flower is all they need, then he already has a way to save her. When the room asks whether he is seriously claiming he can produce one, Shinji answers without hesitation that he can. One of the younger doctors calls him a liar and insists he must have overheard private medical information somewhere. Even Dr. Lee looks uneasy as the accusation continues because a genuine Stardew flower should be completely beyond a normal teenager's reach. Shinji ignores the argument and opens the system instead, checking whether his new cheat can turn that impossible ingredient into something very real. Sure enough, the exchange menu offers exactly what he needs, and 5 points later a Stardew flower is his. He opens the box and casually reveals the glowing blue flower like he did not just materialize a legendary medicine out of nowhere. Dr. Lee and the entire medical team freeze, because there's no mistaking the real thing once it is sitting right in front of them. Shinji hands it over long enough for Dr. Lee to inspect it, and the old man quickly realizes his earlier doubts were completely misplaced. With the argument finished, everyone gathers around Mika's bed and gives Shinji the room he needs to try the treatment. Looking down at her unconscious face, he quietly promises Mika that in this life, he will never stand by and let anyone hurt her again. He channels spiritual energy through the Stardew flower, drawing out the power sealed inside its glowing petals. The blue energy drifts over Mika and sinks into her body, gently stabilizing the ice attribute that the doctors had mistaken for an illness. Almost immediately the monitors begin settling, and the medical staff watches her vitals recover in disbelief. Mika's eyes finally open, weak but conscious, and the first thing she is told is to rest while her body finishes recovering. Shinji lets himself smile now that the future he remembered has finally been changed for the better. Her father grabs his hand in gratitude, thanking the young man who just succeeded where an entire room of specialists could not. They try to keep him around for tea and more questions, but Shinji politely refuses because he has far more preparation to finish tonight. Dr. Lee and Mika's father can only watch him leave, both still trying to understand where someone that young learned any of this. Shinji gives them a casual wave and disappears down the hall before the hospital can turn him into its newest medical mystery. Back home, he immediately starts researching cultivation levels and comparing everything he remembers from the old timeline with his current progress. What really bothers him is remembering that even when he was killed before, he had only reached level 3. True cultivation means circulating spiritual energy through the body again and again until the entire flow becomes stronger, cleaner, and easier to control. So Shinji throws himself into the Brahma Raging Fire technique, using its absurd quality to push his first real cultivation session far beyond a normal beginner's limit. By the time the energy settles, he realizes the technique itself belongs to an outrageously high Imperial Sovereign tier, which explains why every cycle feels so violent. Elsewhere that night, word of the hospital incident has already reached people who care a lot more about spiritual energy than the average doctor. Dr. Lee meets Yue outside and confirms that he really did encounter a young man carrying a genuine Stardew flower. He goes even further, calling Shinji a rare prodigy whose understanding of spiritual cultivation could become extremely important once his strength catches up. The woman accepts a photograph of Shinji and now has a face to match the strange report she was sent to investigate. Dr. Lee also shares the discovery with another senior figure, making it obvious that Shinji's little hospital visit has started spreading through the right circles. Shinji, meanwhile, has no idea anyone is discussing him because his entire body is still being scorched by the fire technique. His first cultivation session finally ends with flames peeling away from his skin and a body that already feels noticeably stronger. Then the glamorous part of cultivation arrives because all the impurities forced out of his body smell absolutely terrible. After cleaning up, he heads outside with a much simpler objective in mind: food, preferably enough to feed several normal people. He walks through the quiet street completely relaxed, even whistling while a mysterious figure watches him from the top of a streetlight. Yue checks Shinji against the photograph and confirms she has finally found the prodigy Dr. Lee described. Rather than introduce herself normally, she hurls a purple energy disc into the street near him and uses the attack to flush out a mutated beast. A massive spiked dog erupts from the blast covered in violent purple energy, instantly turning the empty street into a hunting ground. Shinji glances back at the monster with a grin, because apparently dinner can wait long enough for one quick test of his new strength. The mutated dog lowers itself in front of Shinji with purple energy rolling off its body, ready to see whether the hospital prodigy is actually as dangerous as reported. Shinji covers his nose and complains that the thing reeks, which is a pretty disrespectful response to a monster trying to kill him. The beast takes that personally and launches itself forward at full speed. Shinji springs over the first rush instead of meeting it head-on, letting the dog tear straight through the space where he was standing. It whips its body around immediately, using the momentum of its tail and claws to keep the attack going. One heavy strike catches Shinji in the leg, and the impact is strong enough to make even his reinforced body complain. He grits his teeth, realizing this mutant still hits much harder than an ordinary animal despite how relaxed he was acting. So he creates distance with one explosive jump and stops treating the fight like a warm-up. Fire gathers around his arm as he drops back in with the Flame Emperor fist. The burning punch lands directly on the beast and sends blood spraying from its mouth. Watching from nearby, Yue can barely process how much damage one strike just caused. Shinji follows through before the monster can recover and drives another fire-covered blow into its body. Standing over it afterward, he calls the beast weak, like the entire ambush was more annoying than dangerous. With the fight finished, he simply turns his back and starts walking away. The hidden observer stares after him in disbelief because he just put down a mutant beast with a single decisive punch. What bothers her even more is the attack power behind that fire attribute, which was far beyond what she expected from someone his age. She remembers the beast's earlier strike landing cleanly on him and realizes it barely seemed to slow him down. That combination of offense and durability is enough for her to decide the higher-ups need to hear about Shinji immediately. The next morning he is back home brushing his teeth, sore but otherwise acting like last night's mutant attack was a minor inconvenience. Then a television report mentions that an abnormal event around Mount Shiranui has become serious enough for authorities to order people away from the area. Officials warn viewers that the mountain is extremely dangerous and tell everyone to stay clear until the cause of the phenomenon is understood. Shinji freezes in front of the screen because he can already sense what the news reporters cannot. Fire attribute spiritual energy is gathering there. He grabs his clothes and immediately gets ready to leave, knowing an opportunity like this will not wait around for him. Before he gets far, Rin suddenly grabs at him and leaves Shinji staring at her like he cannot believe she is still doing this. She demands his attention with the same entitled attitude that used to work on him every time. Shinji reminds her that he already told her yesterday to stay away from him. Rin's patience disappears and she starts threatening him over the money she expects him to hand over. He tells her to get lost and never show her face to him again, then walks off while Rin shouts that she will stop bothering him if he refuses to pay now. By the time Shinji reaches Mount Shiranui, the entire place is glowing with abnormal heat and a huge crowd has gathered outside the restricted zone. Security officers stretch across the barrier and keep yelling at people not to enter the dangerous area. The heat is already ridiculous at the edge of the zone, hot enough that food near the barrier is getting cooked in front of everyone. A corn cob suddenly bursts into popcorn, giving the crowd a very clear demonstration of how bad the temperature has become. People start panicking and pushing backward as everyone realizes this is definitely not normal weather. Shinji climbs onto the roof of a vehicle and studies the mountain, feeling the dense fire attribute energy filling the entire area. He decides the best source is deeper inside and jumps straight over the blocked-off entrance. A moment later, he lands beyond the police line while stunned onlookers watch from the safe side. The nearest officer screams for him to come back, because walking farther into that heat should be suicidal. Instead, the fire around Shinji suddenly surges and begins pouring toward his body, making even him wonder how powerful this attribute has become. He stands inside the inferno and lets the Brahma raging fire technique devour the energy, swearing that this time he will become truly strong. Behind the barrier, the crowd can only scream as the flames gather around the same guy they thought was about to burn alive. Shinji finally notices how many people are staring and decides he has attracted more than enough attention for one day. He vanishes from the scene in a streak of fire, and the bizarre heat drops almost immediately after he leaves. Plenty of witnesses have their phones out, so the whole impossible performance is already being recorded from multiple angles. Even the security officer is left frozen, trying to understand what kind of person can enter that furnace and come back stronger. That night, the footage reaches a much more important building where people who understand spiritual energy are already paying attention. A powerful bearded man sits alone while reports explain that the abnormal weather vanished after the mysterious young cultivator appeared. He takes a call and starts connecting the mountain incident with the other strange report that arrived the previous night. Yue confirms that Shinji is also the man who defeated a mutant beast with one punch and shrugged off its attacks. A dossier with Shinji's face lands on the table, giving the organization a name to attach to everything they have been seeing. The bearded leader decides they cannot keep watching from a distance while other factions move first, so he announces that he is going to meet Fujihi Shinji himself, and his subordinate immediately agrees to prepare the meeting. Back home, Shinji sits down with the fire energy he stole from the mountain and pushes his cultivation, while the power is still fresh. The heat concentrates so intensely that even his eyes start glowing as the energy finally settles into his body. The effort pays off because Shinji breaks through to level 2 and unlocks another attribute slot through the system. That breakthrough also opens a new fusion function, giving him more ways to combine the abilities he is collecting. The weapons section catches his attention most. He can permanently infuse an internal attribute into a weapon and essentially build something tailored to himself. Naturally, the first test subject is whatever he can grab at home, so Shinji ends up examining a kitchen cleaver like it is legendary equipment. Before he can experiment, he hears someone outside and immediately turns toward the door. 2 late-night visitors are already waiting for him, and neither one looks like they came over for a casual chat. The older man introduces himself as Chairman Liu of the Spiritual Energy Cultivation Association and identifies the blue-haired woman beside him as his subordinate. Shinji recognizes the organization immediately, but he still wants to know why its chairman personally showed up at his home. Seeing the woman also stirs an old memory, because in his previous life, she once helped him during a dangerous incident, before disappearing on another mission. He studies the card they hand him and asks the obvious question, how exactly did they track him down this quickly? Chairman Liu produces the evidence they collected, including a photo connected to the recent incidents the association has been investigating. Shinji listens carefully and decides they do not seem hostile, but that still does not mean he wants to get tied to them. So when the conversation turns toward joining the association, he flatly admits that organizations really are not his thing. He is willing to hear them out, but his answer does not change just because the offer is coming from Chairman Liu himself. The blue-haired agent pushes back, warning that advancing alone is much harder than he seems to think. She speaks from experience too, which is why his confidence clearly bothers her more than a normal rejection would. She explains that she once refused the association for the same reason, then spent 3 years failing to reach Spirit Awakening before their guidance helped her do it in less than 1. That story makes Shinji pause, mostly because she has no idea he already understands cultivation far beyond what this era considers normal. He gives her an almost cheerful thumbs up anyway, politely acknowledging the advice without actually changing his mind. Yeah, she is not impressed by that response. Chairman Liu steps in before the argument goes anywhere and decides there is no point forcing the recruitment right now. Then his phone rings and the mood changes the second he sees the emergency report. A level 2 mutant beast has appeared nearby, giving Chairman Liu a much more urgent problem than convincing Shinji to sign up. The details are serious enough that he immediately starts issuing orders through the phone. The blue-haired agent straightens up at once and answers Chairman Liu like this is exactly the kind of call she was trained for. He tells Shinji they will have to continue this conversation another time and prepares to leave with his subordinate. Shinji watches them go and thinks about the only decision that really matters to him now, becoming strong enough that nobody can control his future again. With the system and his knowledge of the coming revival, he knows further breakthroughs should be far easier this time around. Then a message from his friend Kotoge pulls his attention to a location on the map. Whatever Kotoge sends him is strange enough that Shinji nearly jumps out of his skin when he sees it. He calls immediately, demanding to know what is happening instead of trying to piece it together through texts. Kotoge says thunder is exploding over the mountain behind his house even though there is no rain, and Shinji instantly understands this is not normal weather. He makes Kotoge confirm the thunder again because there is one possibility that would make this opportunity far too valuable to ignore. On Kotoge's end, the sky has turned pitch black while lightning keeps tearing through the clouds without stopping. That description is enough for Shinji to lock onto the real cause. Most awakened attributes are ordinary elements, like fire, water, wind, and earth, useful but common once the revival spreads. Lightning belongs to the rarer class alongside things like ice, light, and darkness, which makes a natural concentration of it extremely valuable. Above even those are legendary attributes such as void, powers so uncommon that people in the future will fight entire wars over them. Shinji bolts for the door and tells Kotoge to guide him straight to the mountain the moment he arrives. Kotoge is still hiding beside the window with lightning raging outside, very clearly wishing his friend would hurry up. Meanwhile, association personnel are already mobilizing with members asking where the next response team is headed. A red-haired officer explains that an unusually powerful lightning attribute spiritual energy has awakened on a nearby mountain, and the association intends to collect it before the energy disperses. Shinji reaches Kotoge's mountain after dark and follows his flashlight deeper into the forest while the thunder keeps getting louder. The moment he sees lightning hammering the same peak again and again, he knows Kotoge accidentally found something far better than a freak storm. Shinji cannot hide the smile, because a lightning attribute opportunity this concentrated is exactly what he needs for his second slot. The system lets him increase his lightning attribute, but warns that a rare affinity costs twice the normal amount of spiritual energy to develop. He confirms anyway, and the gathered energy begins condensing through the system almost immediately. A blue lightning crystal forms along with the attribute technique Lightning Flash, giving him both the affinity and a way to use it in combat. Shinji holds the crystal beside him and can already feel how much power is packed into something this small. Meanwhile, another lightning strike crashes down nearby, right where an association collection team has been waiting. Two nervous members watch the storm while their team prepares a heavy containment canister for the next surge. Kaori takes the device from them and calmly makes it clear she will handle the dangerous part herself. She steadies her breathing and waits for the exact moment the lightning gathers overhead. When it hits, Kaori catches the current with a collector and forces the wild energy toward the canister. The stream actually bends under her control, and the other two can only stare as she wrestles natural lightning into the device. They immediately start cheering for Miss Kaori like the mission is already finished. The problem is, the canister cannot safely hold that much power, and cracks start forming across it almost at once. Kaori spots the failure and realizes they are about to lose control of the entire charge. The container detonates before the team can fully retreat, forcing everyone to dive away from the blast. Kaori gets back up and warns that the spiritual energy is destabilizing, which makes staying near the strike zone even more dangerous. Then they hear movement in the grass and turn toward a place no civilian should be anywhere near. Shinji steps out of the brush and surprises Kaori by casually appearing inside the restricted mountain zone. She immediately orders him back, telling him this is not somewhere ordinary people can safely set foot. Instead of retreating, Shinji grins and makes it obvious he came here for the exact thing they are afraid of. The other men panic as he jumps straight toward the violent lightning gathering below them. A massive surge swallows Shinji from head to toe, and for a second, there is nothing visible except blue-white electricity. The association members are horrified because no normal cultivator should be able to stand inside a current that strong. Kaori realizes the stranger they were trying to save may actually have awakened an ultra-rare lightning attribute of his own. Shinji keeps taking the power directly into his body and refuses to let the pressure force him back. The lightning tears through him hard enough to make every muscle lock, but he grits his teeth and keeps the circulation moving. His eyes flare as the system-guided technique finally catches the current instead of letting it rip him apart. Now Shinji stops resisting and challenges the storm to give him everything it has. The enormous pillar begins collapsing inward around him as he absorbs more and more of the loose spiritual energy. When the last arcs settle across his hand, he can finally feel the lightning attribute responding like it belongs to him. The system then offers an even crazier option: fuse his fire and lightning to create the legendary Thunderflame attribute. Of course he accepts. An orange fire starts twisting through the blue electricity around his body as the two powers merge. Elsewhere, heavy rain falls over an industrial complex where the association's other emergency response team has already arrived. Their briefing is simple: only one mutant beast is confirmed inside, but that beast is a giant snake. The blue-haired agent leading the group is more concerned by the poison attribute around the target than by its size alone. Her teammates grip green spiritual crystals while preparing for a fight in an environment already contaminated by the creature's energy. She gives the order to move, and the team heads deeper into the warehouse before the snake can grow any stronger. The blue-haired woman stays alert as the rain and darkness make it almost impossible to tell where the creature is hiding. Inside, the three spread out beneath the industrial scaffolding and search the empty floor for any sign of movement. Then two red eyes appear in the darkness behind them, which is a pretty bad answer to the question of where the snake went. The beast attacks without warning, smashing through the area with enough force to throw the blue-haired woman across the floor. A gigantic green snake erupts into view, poison energy swirling around its head as it prepares another strike. One of the men slashes at it from the side, while his partner moves in to support him. Their combined attack freezes a huge section of the serpent inside thick ice and finally stops its movement. For 1 second, the men think they actually did it. The blue-haired agent immediately shouts a warning because she can still feel the monster's energy rising inside the ice. The snake bursts free with poisonous green mist exploding around it, catching the nearest fighters before they can get clear. Both men collapse coughing as the poison floods the room and starts shutting their bodies down. The blue-haired woman tries to call for help, but the giant snake is already moving again while her team stops responding. She drops over one of her injured teammates, barely able to stay conscious herself in the thickening poison. Above her, the serpent coils across the room and fixes its red eyes on the last person still moving. That night, Chairman Liu calls Shinji over and lays out the emergency at the warehouse before the situation gets any worse. The response team is already trapped inside, and Lu admits the injured woman leading them is basically the only person there still capable of holding the mutant back. Instead of panicking, Shinji focuses on one detail from the report. If that creature finishes evolving, the material it leaves behind could be extremely valuable. Lu catches the look on his face and immediately gets nervous, because this kid is somehow treating a monster emergency like a shopping opportunity. Shinji makes his position clear before agreeing to anything, since helping is one thing and walking away empty-handed is another. Lu remembers what happened with the mutant dog, and knows Shinji has already proven he can deal with creatures normal people cannot. That earlier fight is enough evidence that sending him into the warehouse is not nearly as reckless as it sounds. When Lu realizes Shinji is actually volunteering himself, he asks if the boy seriously plans to handle this personally. His biggest concern is still the people trapped inside, and every minute they waste makes a rescue less likely. Shinji raises one finger and gives him a simple condition before heading out. Lu agrees and even offers to send as much backup as Shinji wants, desperate to make sure the rescue succeeds. Shinji turns him down without hesitation. For what he is about to do, a crowd would only get in his way. Back inside the warehouse, Yu can barely lift herself from the floor while another scream echoes through the poison-filled room. The giant snake towers over the fallen team, its body already larger and more distorted than when the fight began. Yu finally understands the real problem. The beast is not simply getting stronger. It is actively trying to evolve again. She forces herself upright anyway, because if she stays down now, there will be nobody left between that thing and the rest of her team. The snake's red eye fixes on her the moment she moves. Then it lunges, filling her entire view with fangs and poison before she can fully regain her footing. Yue throws herself aside at the last second, escaping the bite by barely enough distance to stay alive. She enters with ice, driving a frozen strike directly into the monster's head to force it back. More shards gather around her hand, but her control is already slipping after everything she has taken tonight. The realization hits her immediately. She does not have enough strength left for another clean exchange. The snake notices too, and one violent sweep sends her crashing across the warehouse before she can defend herself. Yue lands hard and coughs blood, her body finally refusing to keep up with her will. The mutant closes in on her while she lies against the broken floor with nowhere left to retreat. All she can do is stare up at it, knowing the next attack should be the one that finishes her. Instead, Shinji casually walks in with a sword over his shoulder and asks where the rest of Chairman Liu's people are. Yu warns him that the snake has already reached level 3, shocked that he came into this place alone after hearing that. Shinji barely reacts, brushing off the warning as though she just told him the floor was wet. He steps in front of the evolved beast and invites it to show him exactly what a level 3 mutant can do. The snake accepts immediately, snapping forward with enough speed to blur its entire head. Yue shouts for Shinji to get away, convinced he is about to be swallowed before he can even attack. But fire and lightning erupt around him together, and Shinji decides this is the perfect place to test his newly fused power. He drives the charged strike straight into the snake and stops its rush with raw force. The impact sends the enormous body whipping backward through the warehouse. Yue manages to stand again, staring at Shinji because the level 3 monster she could barely survive against just got knocked away in one exchange. The snake slams down hard, momentarily stunned by a hit it clearly did not expect. Yu warns Shinji not to underestimate it yet, because one successful blow does not make that poison any less deadly. He reaches back and draws the sword from over his shoulder, finally deciding to stop testing the creature with his bare hands. Fire and lightning coil around the blade at the same time, turning an ordinary swing into something the mutant cannot simply tank. Shinji locks onto the target and unleashes lightning flash. The slash tears through the snake in one explosive line, mixing both attributes into a finishing strike before it can recover. He lifts the weapon back onto his shoulder as the electricity fades. Job done. Yue can only stare because Shinji did not just use lightning. She clearly saw two different attributes working together. He treats that impossible display like it needs no special explanation, which somehow makes the whole thing even stranger. Yue's eyes widen as she realizes how far outside normal awakened rules this guy might actually be. By the time the warehouse is secured, the night has gone quiet again and the survivors are brought back safely. Later, Yue sits across from Chairman Liu and gives him the full report on what Shinji did inside. Liu falls silent, thinking through yet another incident where the kid displayed strength he should not realistically possess yet. The more he considers it, the harder Shinji becomes to place inside any normal category. Yu, now cleaned up and wrapped in a blanket, quietly drinks while the conversation finally leaves the battlefield behind. And Liu chooses that exact moment to ask Yu whether it might finally be time for her to get a boyfriend. Bro changed subjects with absolutely no warning. After everything that happened, Chairman Liu finally tells the room what the association can no longer ignore. Spiritual energy is genuinely returning. One of the executives still pushes back, arguing that a handful of strange incidents could just be coincidences. The field officers aren't buying that explanation anymore, especially after seeing mutated creatures and awakened abilities with their own eyes. Another official points to the factory evacuation and insists that acting early is exactly why nobody was caught in the disaster. That only brings another objection from the uniform side, because the evidence is piling up faster than the old rules can explain it. Within seconds, the meeting turns into a full argument, with both sides talking over each other like nobody plans on leaving quietly. Chairman Liu lets them burn through the noise before stepping in with the kind of silence that makes the room behave again. The officials immediately turn back to him, waiting for Chairman Liu to settle what the association is actually going to do. Liu reminds them that these incidents are no longer theoretical, and one bad call could easily cost subordinates or civilians their lives. So instead of debating whether the revival is real, he moves the discussion toward how they prepare for it. He brings up the city map and starts outlining a wider response, including how awakened people should be identified and organized before the situation gets worse. Some members still look uncertain, but now they're listening instead of arguing. Then Liu lifts a dossier that matters more than the rest, because one name keeps appearing around impossible incidents. The officers review the reports and quickly realize the same young man has been involved in multiple cases the association barely understood. Right there in the file is Shinji, a civilian who somehow keeps reaching these spiritual events before trained teams do. That creates another problem for the board. Nobody knows where his knowledge came from, but they can't deny that he has repeatedly saved their people. Liu adds the detail that really gets everyone's attention. Shinji has already demonstrated both fire and lightning attributes. One executive immediately questions whether somebody the abnormal should be brought any closer to the association. A field officer counters that leaving a talent like that completely outside their structure would be even more reckless. Chairman Liu makes the call himself. They will keep Shinji close, work with him instead of against him, and prepare for the world that is clearly coming. The next morning, that very dangerous future looks a lot less dramatic from the quiet streets outside Shinji's apartment. Shinji is still dead asleep, enjoying one of the few peaceful mornings his second life has given him. Then he hears someone moving around inside the apartment and wakes up instantly. He storms out ready to deal with an intruder, already annoyed that somebody had the nerve to ruin his sleep. A second later, he's charging down the hall looking like he's about to start a war before breakfast. And then he finds Yue in his kitchen with a broom, calmly greeting him like this is the most normal thing in the world. Shinji's brain completely freezes. Then it catches up, and his reaction is basically one long question about why she is inside his house. Yue keeps stacking her things and casually explains that she came here to live with him. Yeah, that answer somehow makes the situation worse. Once they sit down, she explains that the arrangement came through the association and makes communication with Shinji much easier. He immediately argues that moving an agent into his apartment is a ridiculous solution to a communication problem. Yue doesn't look remotely embarrassed about it and makes clear that the decision has already been approved. She also has her own reasons for staying close, especially with more awakened cases starting to appear around the city. Shinji realizes the association is trying to organize people with supernatural attributes before the public fully understands what is happening. That brings Mika back to mind because her rare ice awakening makes her exactly the kind of person this new organization will want involved. Since Shinji already wanted to check on her anyway, he tells Yue he'll participate and see what the association is putting together. Soon after, Chairman Liu has a full group of awakened recruits lined up outside and warns them that peaceful habits won't be enough once the revival accelerates. He makes it clear that having an attribute does not automatically make any of them ready for real danger. Among the recruits is Mika, now recovered enough to stand with the others while listening carefully to Chairman Liu's briefing. Nearby, Kaori watches the gathering with a much less impressed expression, especially when one particular recruit starts showing off. She has already dealt with Ken's personality before, so his confidence isn't exactly new information. Ken, meanwhile, looks completely comfortable being the loudest guy in the group and clearly enjoys the attention his strength gets him. Kaori responds with the exhausted patience of someone who has heard this speech more than once. Ken doesn't take the hint and keeps talking like the training ground was built specifically for his entrance. The guys around him feed the ego immediately, cheering while Ken flexes and soaks up every second of it. Kaori barely reacts. Apparently this clown show is a regular event. When Shinji arrives with Yue, he quietly sizes up the roster and notices that aside from Mika's ice attribute, most of the others have fairly ordinary awakenings. Yu points out Ken among the participants, giving Shinji a quick idea of who has influence and who the others tend to follow. Chairman Liu gathers everyone's attention again, preparing to introduce the final person joining their training. Shinji steps forward beside Yue without any interest in making the moment dramatic. Mika recognizes him immediately, the same guy connected to the bizarre spiritual energy that saved her at the hospital. Chairman Liu presents Shinji to the group and makes it clear that he will be participating with them despite not being a normal association recruit. Chairman Liu's tone tells everyone this isn't a casual favor, he expects them to take Shinji seriously. Ken just grins at the newcomer, already looking like he found the person he wants to test first. Ken wastes no time testing the newcomer, stepping right up to Shinji and asking whether he really thinks he can handle him. The challenge turns serious fast, as Ken releases his spiritual energy and starts talking like somebody already signed his death waiver. He charges straight at Shinji with everything wrapped around one punch. Shinji barely reacts, watching the attack come in with the same bored look he had a second ago. Before the fist can land, Chairman Liu steps between them and catches Ken's arm himself. Liu reminds him that association orders are not optional, and picking fights during briefing is a quick way to learn that lesson the hard way. Ken immediately loses some of that confidence and backs off under Chairman Liu's stare. The others are more than happy to agree once discipline is mentioned, especially now that somebody else is the one getting warned. With the interruption handled, Liu moves on beside Shinji as if the little challenge never mattered. Kaori, however, looks genuinely surprised that Ken was shut down that easily. Ken can only grit his teeth and swallow the embarrassment for now. Chairman Liu lays out the actual exercise. Anyone who keeps disrupting discipline is gone, and today's target is a humanoid mutant known as the Thorn Beast. Mika listens closely as he warns them that the training is meant to break the idea that awakened people are automatically safe. Liu makes the stakes clear. Once spiritual creatures start appearing, hesitation and arrogance can both get someone killed. The team is then sent into the forest, with Shinji walking near the front while Ken, Mika, Kaori, and the others follow. He keeps scanning the surroundings instead of treating the route like a casual hike. Mika notices the caution, while Kaori keeps an eye on both Shinji and the louder members of the group. Then they find a massive tree covered in glowing golden strands of spiritual energy. Shinji warns everyone not to get too close, because there is something very wrong with the energy surrounding that tree. When the others ask what he means, he tells them the safest choice is to treat it like a monster until proven otherwise. Ken laughs the warning off immediately and calls the whole thing a joke. Shinji doesn't bother arguing. If Ken wants to ignore the warning, he can find out for himself. That is basically an invitation to Ken, who marches toward the tree with two of his buddies right behind him. Up close, the amount of spiritual energy pouring through the trunk looks incredible, and Ken is convinced they just found a free training spot. His friends agree, staring at the glow like somebody left a pile of upgrades sitting in the forest. Ken immediately starts imagining how impressive he'll look after absorbing all of it, with the women apparently forming a whole fan club in his head. So the three sit beneath the tree and begin cultivating, pulling the surrounding energy into their bodies. Mika watches from a distance and quietly asks whether those guys are really going to be okay. Shinji keeps his eyes on the tree while Kaori waits for an answer. Kaori presses him on it because his earlier warning sounded a lot more serious than he's acting now. He says the danger depends on whether the tree has already crossed the line from mutated plant to active spiritual creature. Kaori gets irritated that he let Ken sit there after saying something that ominous. Shinji points out that he literally warned the guy, and Kaori does not find that defense nearly as funny as he does. Mika stays between them while the argument turns into a quick sideshow of its own. She finally asks who is supposed to be leading this squad before the entire exercise becomes chaos. Shinji answers with a small smile, because apparently leadership does not include physically stopping grown men from making terrible decisions. Kaori points back toward Ken and insists that if he knows something is wrong, he should say exactly what it is. Shinji reminds them that the warning already happened, and right on cue, the tree finally proves him right. The golden glow turns violent as the trunk twists, branches snap awake, and the people cultivating beneath it are thrown around by the sudden movement. Ken looks up in horror as the harmless training tree becomes the exact kind of monster Shinji warned him about. One of Ken's friends gets caught and starts screaming that he does not want to die here. Ken forces himself forward with a knife, promising to cut the guy free. He reaches the binding branch and swings before the tree can drag his teammate any farther. Ken pours his strength into the cut, trying to sever the mutated wood in one clean strike. It barely works, and his face changes when he realizes the branch is far tougher than anything a normal tree should be. The counterattack comes instantly, a red-black limb slamming into him hard enough to tear blood from his body. More branches wrap around Ken before he can recover, leaving him suspended and completely at the creature's mercy. Then the tree whips him across the clearing and smashes him into the ground. Ken can only stare up from the dirt as the thorn beast looms over him, finally understanding what cultivation in this new world is going to cost. A streak of blue lightning suddenly cuts through the branches before the next attack can land. Bruised and bleeding, Ken looks up and realizes exactly who just stepped in. Shinji walks past him wrapped in crackling electricity, ready to handle the monster that Ken thought was a free power-up 5 minutes ago. Ken is still trying to stand after that rescue, but Shinji has already taken control of the fight. He refuses to abandon the injured recruits, and Shinji gives him at least some credit for having that much backbone. Then lightning crawls over Shinji's short blade as he prepares to cut the people still trapped in the branches free. Ken finally realizes the guy he challenged a few minutes ago was holding back an absurd amount of power. Shinji moves first and slices through the corrupted wood before the thorn beast can drag anyone deeper inside. One trapped recruit drops free, barely processing that the same man everyone underestimated just saved his life. The thorn beast roars as the severed branches recoil, and the entire mutated tree starts shaking. Shinji warns the others that this thing is no longer just a tree absorbing spiritual energy. Ken and his teammates pull themselves together, because there are still people nearby who need to get out alive. Then, the real body tears itself from the ground, revealing a massive, bubbling spring level 3, thorn beast. Seeing the whole monster at once wipes the last bit of confidence off the association recruits' faces. Shinji answers by bringing out his fire attribute while lightning continues moving through his body. With both powers active together, he tells anyone afraid of dying that cultivation is probably the wrong career choice. The thorn beast swings one gigantic wooden arm down at him before he can say anything else. He slips around the strike and uses the creature's own momentum to move straight past its reach. The monster twists back toward him, furious that something this small keeps refusing to get crushed. A forest of sharpened branches erupts toward Shinji and launches him high above the clearing. Instead of panicking in midair, he watches the attack pattern and waits for the opening he actually wants. Then a wall of fire erupts around him and burns through the incoming spikes before they can touch him. For the first time, the thorn beast hesitates as its wooden attacks disappear inside Shinji's flames. He compresses fire and lightning together around one fist, turning two attributes into a single concentrated strike. The monster charges anyway, right as that blazing sphere finishes forming above its head. Shinji drives the combined blast into its body, and the impact tears through the thorn beast's center in one violent burst. Ken can only stare because the monster that nearly killed his squad is getting overwhelmed by one person. Mika looks just as stunned, and the power Shinji displays leaves her completely speechless. Standing in the fading fire and lightning, Shinji finally understands why stories make saving everyone look so dramatic. Back in the association control room, the staff replay the battle and struggle to explain how one recruit produced that much power. Chairman Liu watches the footage in silence while the operators nervously wait to see whether he has any objections. Before anyone can finish the analysis, the entire facility suddenly shakes hard enough to make the control room panic. Yua looks to Chairman Liu for an answer, but Chairman Liu already seems to know this is not an ordinary earthquake. His attention sharpens because another abnormal spiritual fluctuation has appeared inside the training grounds. The Mandarin system pulls up the thorn beast's energy profile and shows just how much spiritual power was concentrated around it. Shinji studies the same information beside the remains, realizing that the energy did not simply disappear when the monster fell. A pillar of freezing spiritual energy suddenly erupts nearby, turning the entire clearing blue-white in an instant. Ken and the others look over in shock while Shinji immediately understands who caused it. Mika has absorbed the released spiritual energy and forced a breakthrough far beyond what she managed at this point in his previous life. Everyone gathers around the frozen remains, while Mika excitedly asks whether that overwhelming burst really came from her. Shinji confirms it, and the praise leaves her blushing even though she's clearly thrilled by the result. Watching Mika grow stronger only hardens his resolve to protect her this time and eventually settle the debt from his first life. With the danger finally gone, the group agrees to wrap up the field exercise and head back together. That night, the training crew trades monsters and near-death experiences for a table absolutely buried under barbecue. They raise a toast to Mika for jumping from bubbling spring level 1 to level 3 in a single breakthrough. Mika accepts the congratulations with a bright smile while Kaori watches her enjoy the attention. Ken comes over with a bottle and awkwardly thanks Shinji, admitting he never actually meant to abandon his teammates. His two friends immediately start crying about how loyal their captain is, turning one sincere moment into a complete disaster. Shinji is about to keep eating when someone announces that the surrounding area needs to be cleared immediately. Armed soldiers move through the restaurant and order every civilian to evacuate without explaining what is happening. Shinji stays seated and watches them carefully because this military response is far too aggressive for a routine disturbance. The others begin moving around the restaurant, but Shinji decides to wait and see exactly what these soldiers came for. One masked soldier notices the group refusing to leave and turns his attention directly toward their table. He orders them out again, but Shinji calmly keeps drinking while everyone around him feels the tension climbing. Ken slams his hand down and warns the soldier not to underestimate their captain or the association members beside him. The rifle immediately comes up against Ken's throat, and the soldier asks whether he seriously wants to die here. Ken's spiritual energy surges in response, because threatening him at gunpoint is apparently the fastest way to restart the problem. Shinji watches the confrontation in silence, already judging how much trouble this new group is about to cause. Elsewhere, military commanders are already scrambling over the sudden spiritual revival, with an escaped mutant dog becoming their most urgent problem. The senior officer in charge refuses to let panic excuse sloppy work and demands a response before civilians get hurt. His orders are simple: contain the abnormal beast quickly and keep the surrounding population out of danger. The commander makes it clear that the military cannot afford to look helpless during the first wave of supernatural incidents. One younger captain immediately stands and accepts the assignment. The room answers in unison as the operation is approved, and units begin moving into position. Before sending him out, the commander gives one final warning to handle the situation cleanly and avoid unnecessary casualties. That same captain reaches the field command center and begins coordinating the search through surveillance teams. Then a feed catches the confrontation at the restaurant, and he notices a familiar face standing among the association recruits. Back outside, Ken is still squared up with the armed soldier, while Shinji sits at the table like this somehow became dinner entertainment. Shinji finally steps in and tells Ken there is no reason to turn an evacuation order into a fight with the military. He puts a hand between them, gets Ken to back off, and tells the group they should simply leave. The soldier watches Shinji carefully, clearly surprised by how easily he calmed down someone who was ready to throw hands seconds ago. Mika, Kiori, Ken, and the others start moving out while complaining that the night somehow keeps getting more complicated. Just as Shinji is about to follow them, someone from the military calls his name from behind. He turns and immediately recognizes the voice, his guarded expression giving way to genuine surprise. The young captain greets Shinji like an old friend and casually pats his shoulder instead of treating him like a suspect. Mika and the others stare because apparently Shinji also has military connections nobody bothered to mention. The captain throws an arm around him and starts talking with the familiarity of someone who has known him for years. Ken and the girls relax once it becomes obvious this officer is not here to arrest anybody. A short distance away, the two catch up while the captain explains why the entire neighborhood is being cleared. He tells Shinji that the military is hunting a spiritually mutated dog that escaped containment and has already become dangerous. His priority is civilian safety, so he asks Shinji and the association recruits to stay clear while the operation is underway. Shinji listens without arguing, but the look on his face says he does not completely trust the military's assessment. The captain salutes his soldiers and sends them back to their positions as the perimeter closes around the search zone. Shinji gives him an easy smile, claiming he has no intention of interfering with a properly organized military operation. The captain studies him for a moment, because knowing Shinji makes that promise sound less reassuring than it should. Still, he orders his men forward and commits the unit to the hunt. Shinji apologizes to the nearest soldier with suspiciously good manners, then quietly follows the operation from a distance anyway. The military seals the streets with armored teams and establishes a containment line around the suspected location. From a rooftop, Shinji watches the deployment and admits the captain is actually handling the situation pretty well. Then his attention snaps toward the street below, when a new spiritual fluctuation suddenly appears inside the perimeter. A soldier at the monitor confirms the mutant has surfaced and the entire unit shifts into combat readiness. The escape beast crashes into the street surrounded by purple-red energy, charging straight through the first defensive line. Rifles open up immediately as the soldiers pour fire into the mutant dog. The rounds strike its body, but the creature keeps coming with barely any loss of speed. Then purple energy gathers inside its mouth, revealing that the mutation gave it something much worse than stronger muscles. The beast releases a massive supernatural blast across the street. Shinji recognizes the danger at once and realizes the military has underestimated how quickly this thing is evolving. The captain reaches the same conclusion as the purple energy swirls around his unit, and he warns everyone the beast is changing again. Soldiers sprint for cover before the next attack can wipe out the exposed formation. The mutant's energy detonates through the street and throws multiple troops off their feet. When the smoke clears, the dog has grown even more monstrous, with long bone-like spikes erupting across its body. The captain stares at the new form and understands that the situation just moved far beyond a normal capture mission. The evolved mutant towers over Keita, while the captain realizes the thing somehow became even worse after surviving the first barrage. His soldiers look to him for an order, but Keita already knows there is no clean retreat with that monster this close, so he charges with the remaining unit and tells everyone to stay on him instead of scattering. The beast answers immediately, carving a red arc through the street before they can surround it. Keita throws himself down as the slash tears through the formation and sends soldiers flying in every direction. The troops behind the barrier can only stare at how badly one evolved animal is dismantling a trained response team. Keita is still conscious, but the blood on his face makes it obvious he cannot take another clean hit. The mutant lunges straight at him anyway, apparently very committed to finishing the job. Before it reaches Keita, blue lightning detonates across the beast and stops the charge cold. Shinji steps into its path with current wrapped around his body and catches the incoming paw instead of dodging. The shock runs through the mutant's entire frame, forcing a roar out of it for the first time since evolving. It tears itself free and sweeps another massive claw toward Shinji from across the ruined street. Kita looks up in disbelief when he realizes his old friend is not just awakened, but a cultivator capable of facing this thing head-on. Shinji casually flips a combat knife into his hand, because apparently this is what passes for equipment when he arrives uninvited. The soldiers warn that ordinary weapons barely damage a level 3 mutant, much less one that has just evolved. Shinji ignores the concern and calls down another column of lightning around himself and the beast. He condenses that current along the knife until the cheap blade is glowing like a weapon several grades above what it actually is. The mutant lowers its body and charges through the residual energy, spikes first and completely fearless. Shinji dives toward it with the lightning-infused blade pulled back for one committed strike. The attack rips across the beast and throws its enormous body upward under the force of the impact. Blood pours from its mouth while the lightning keeps crawling through the wound, finally proving the evolved defense can be broken. Kita can barely believe what he is watching, because Shinji is using a lightning attribute at a level the military never knew he possessed. The mutant lands hard, but the blue cut left across its body is still burning through the red aura around it. Shinji walks forward, surrounded by electricity as the beast claws at the air and tries to force itself back into the fight. Then he adds fire to the knife as well, stacking a second attribute over the lightning infusion. One downward slash splits through the mutant's reinforced body before it can recover its stance. The soldiers are stunned as someone can output this much spiritual energy when the worldwide revival has barely begun. Kita just grins through the bruises, because his supposedly normal best friend apparently forgot to mention becoming a walking disaster. Shinji studies the fading fire and lightning around his hand, and decides he needs a real weapon before these enemies get any stronger. With the immediate danger gone, he stops in front of Kita while the soldiers keep a respectful distance around them. Kita comes over smiling despite looking like he lost an argument with a truck, and Shinji tells him not to overdo it next time. The captain waves his men off and lets Shinji leave, still acting far too cheerful for someone who was nearly eaten 5 minutes ago. Later that night, the military begins reviewing every recording from the containment operation. One laptop freezes on the exact moment Shinji drove lightning into the evolved mutant. Kita's superior asks whether the young man in the footage is really his friend, and he proudly upgrades that to best friend. She keeps watching the recording and asks how much Kita actually knows about Shinji's abilities. Kita scratches his head because, after what happened tonight, the answer is clearly not nearly enough. His superior falls quiet and studies Shinji with the kind of interest that means his anonymous days are shrinking fast. By morning, the city looks normal again despite the battle that tore through the streets only hours earlier. Shinji returns home carrying breakfast, already eating before he even gets the door fully open. Yue is waiting inside and immediately asks where he disappeared to last night. He tells her Kita was in danger, so helping his friend seemed like a pretty reasonable reason to leave. Yue keeps questioning him, while Shinji focuses on the burger like this conversation is happening during a commercial break. Her expression sharpens when the details still do not explain why he involved himself with a military containment operation. Shinji takes another bite and refuses to act like fighting an evolved mutant should have ruined breakfast. Then his phone rings, finally giving him an excuse to look away from Yue's interrogation. The caller introduces himself as Kawasaki Keita's superior, which immediately gets Shinji's attention. Yue watches as he listens, curious about why someone above a military captain is contacting him directly. The officer tells Shinji they located a place where intense fire attribute spiritual energy is pouring out and asks whether he is interested. That wipes away the boredom instantly, because a fire-rich location is exactly the kind of opportunity Shinji has been waiting for. The fire-rich location turns out to have been strange even before Shinji gets there, with workers reporting a blue flame hanging in the air without any normal fuel. One worker even reaches toward it, only for the supernatural fire to flare larger the moment somebody gets close. The military seals the entire zone after the phenomenon spreads instead of burning itself out, leaving the construction site drowned in spiritual energy. By the next day, emergency vehicles are clearing the surrounding roads because the energy storm has grown strong enough to threaten nearby residents. Kita's superior personally picks Shinji up, and judging by the sports car, the military apparently has a very different transportation budget than he expected. He quickly notices she is watching him almost as closely as the road. When she admits part of the trip is to monitor him, Shinji reacts like she just announced a full-time stalker assignment. The officer barely entertains the complaint and reminds him that somebody with his abilities is naturally going to attract attention. She accelerates again while explaining that the abnormal zone is still expanding despite the evacuation. Shinji stops joking once he hears how concentrated the fire attribute has become. His escort makes clear that the military does not know whether the phenomenon is a resource, a threat, or both. Shinji leans back and says he'll judge it himself when they arrive. The confidence earns him a skeptical look, but he has already survived enough future disasters to know what valuable spiritual zones can become. She accepts the answer and quietly decides he is every bit as self-assured as Kita described. Her driving nearly becomes the first threat of the mission when another vehicle cuts close and Shinji immediately tells her not to rush. They finally get out and continue on foot, with Shinji following the officer toward the secured district. Then he spots somebody ahead and his entire mood changes before the other side even notices him. A blonde man is walking beside the pink-haired woman Shinji remembers from his previous life. That familiar face is enough to bring back exactly how badly those people treated him before the regression. The blonde recognizes Shinji too and immediately starts talking down to him like their old hierarchy still matters. Even nearby cameras turn toward the argument once the public confrontation starts drawing attention. The blonde blames Shinji for wasting the opportunity he supposedly offered him, making sure everyone around them hears it. His friends pile on with laughter, happy to treat Shinji like the same easy target they remember. Shinji just looks exhausted by the performance because none of them understand how irrelevant their approval has become. Keita's superior steps back to his side, and the entire atmosphere changes before she even says anything. The crowd recognizes her immediately, which is apparently all it takes for the heckling to disappear into awkward silence. The blonde and the pink-haired woman both freeze when they realize Shinji arrived with someone far above their social games. The blonde instantly switches personalities and offers a sparkling introduction, hoping charm can erase the last 30 seconds. She asks whether this guy is actually Shinji's friend, and the question is generous enough to make him pause. Shinji's face gives the answer before he bothers saying it. He leaves with the officer, while the blonde is forced to stand there and watch the person he mocked walk away with military authority. The surrounding students immediately start laughing and gossiping once the pair is out of earshot. The pink-haired woman takes the humiliation personally, especially because Shinji barely acknowledged her at all. She turns on the blonde in a full tantrum while he scrambles to calm her down in front of everybody. He promises to make it up to her with a hunting trip, desperate to recover some dignity after the encounter. Shinji and the officers soon reach the sealed zone, where blue spiritual fire is still spreading across the ground instead of weakening. Mixed into it are hotter red-orange flames, giving the whole area the look of two different fire attributes fighting for the same space. Shinji confirms the energy is still growing, so waiting for it to disappear on its own is not going to solve anything. At the center, a massive vortex of blue spiritual energy is being pulled toward one concentrated point beneath the construction site. Kita's superior checks the readings again and realizes the pressure is climbing faster than the equipment can comfortably track. She orders the soldiers to keep the perimeter tight while Shinji prepares to go farther in. The troops warn her that the density inside is high enough to injure normal awakened people just from exposure. Shinji walks into the blue flames anyway, letting the energy wrap around him instead of resisting it. His escort shouts after him because even she did not expect him to enter the core that casually. Watching from outside, she can feel the residual fire attribute in her own body reacting to the field around him. Shinji reaches the floating mass of blue flame and finally gets close enough to inspect what has been feeding the entire phenomenon. Rather than destroy it, he starts drawing the concentrated spiritual energy toward himself. The process works, and a small smile appears when the first wave enters his body without rejecting him. He commits fully, because a place overflowing with pure fire attribute is basically a cultivation gift delivered directly to his doorstep. Blue flames erupt around him as the gathered energy starts pouring into his meridians all at once. The pressure blasts outward hard enough that Kita's superior has to cover her face just to keep watching. Inside the storm, Shinji realizes the amount here could push him far beyond level 4 and possibly all the way toward level 6. That possibility is more than enough motivation, and he locks his focus on absorbing every bit his body can handle. The blue fire floods into Shinji faster and faster until even the surrounding soldiers can feel the concentration around his body climbing. One of the men can only stare and wonder whether the person inside that storm is actually human. Shinji, meanwhile, looks completely fine with it and keeps absorbing the energy like he just found free money. Fumi has to force the loose spiritual flames away from the perimeter before the expanding pressure reaches the soldiers behind her. When the storm finally settles, Shinji simply walks out through the smoke under everyone's stunned gaze. Fumi asks if he is really all right, and he answers with the calm confidence of someone who just benefited from the entire incident. She checks the remaining condensed material, still trying to understand what exactly survived after he drained the core. A sudden burst catches her off guard and knocks her balance away. Shinji moves instantly, catching Fumi before she hits the ground while the last traces of fire curl around them. For one awkward second, they end up way closer than either of them planned, and Fumi is definitely the one more bothered by it. Later at a cafe, she asks directly whether Shinji really absorbed the spiritual energy from that entire zone into his own body. Fumi listens carefully because what she witnessed is far beyond the normal cultivation methods the military has documented. Shinji turns the remaining condensed material in his hand and confirms the phenomenon was valuable rather than useless waste. That leads Fumi to the obvious question. Just how much stronger did the absorption make him? He avoids giving her an exact answer, which tells her enough to know the increase was significant. Fumi is still relieved the zone has been neutralized and offers him a direct contact route for future abnormal incidents. Her tone softens now that the operation is over, making this feel a lot more like cooperation than surveillance. Shinji makes one thing clear though, helping with threats does not mean he is joining the military. Fumi accepts that without pushing, satisfied that she can at least call him when something worth his attention appears. That night, Shinji finally gets home expecting the day to be over. A stream of messages on his phone makes it very obvious Fumi intends to keep using that new contact information. Yue notices the conversation, while Shinji casually says he'll deal with whatever was discussed tomorrow. She puts the phone down with far more force than necessary. Then the bedroom door closes, leaving Shinji to wonder what exactly he did wrong this time. He sleeps deeply after the intense cultivation session, completely unaware that the apartment is about to become even less peaceful. By morning, Shinji wakes up looking like his soul has not fully returned to his body yet. It takes him a few seconds to realize something about the room feels very wrong. Then he finds Fumi sitting inside his apartment like dropping by unannounced is apparently normal military procedure. Whatever explanation she gives only makes Shinji more confused about how she got comfortable this quickly. His delayed realization turns into full panic as he starts asking why she is in his house at all. The bigger problem hits when he checks the bedroom and realizes Rei is nowhere to be found. Fumi sits with him and explains why she came, finally replacing the comedy with something serious. One detail in the report instantly wipes the sleep from Shinji's face. He grabs the file and starts reading through the information himself instead of waiting for a summary. The more he sees, the worse his expression gets. Shinji demands the exact location because the incident described in the report is connected to Yue. A second later, he is already pulling on his clothes and rushing out, determined to reach the association before the situation gets any worse. Far away, the trouble is already unfolding beneath the water near the city. Yue sinks deeper with no one beside her, frustrated that she cannot rely on Shinji this time. She forces herself to stay conscious and keeps searching through the dark water despite the pressure around her. Rather than retreat, Yes steadies her body and prepares to fight whatever is moving below. Ice spiritual energy explodes from her hands and cuts through the water in a concentrated blast. The attack expands into a massive frozen blade, giving her a weapon large enough to threaten something far bigger than a normal fish. Yue watches the darkness ahead, waiting to see whether the strike actually stops the creature. Then her eyes widens as an enormous shadow comes straight through the disturbed water. A gigantic mutated sea beast opens its mouth beneath her, revealing exactly why this mission became an emergency. Yue fires an ice attack through the water before the mutant can close the distance. The blast catches the creature head-on, but stopping it underwater is nowhere near that easy. Dark tentacles surge out of the murk and wrap around her before she can pull away. The pressure hits immediately, and Yue's face twists as the bindings tighten. The monster keeps dragging her deeper while demanding an answer she has no room to give. With her body pinned, even breathing becomes a fight. Another violent strike tears to the water and leaves her barely able to resist. Yue looks up and realizes the thing is about to finish the job. Then blue lightning rips through the darkness and Shinji drops straight into the fight. He reaches her first, catching Yue, while keeping one eye on the monster below. Shinji gets her moving toward the surface, before the creature can rack them both up again. A huge burst of ice and lightning erupts from the water as they escape the attack zone. Fumi reaches the shoreline and immediately asks whether the mutant was actually defeated. Shinji hands Ye over for treatment instead of pretending she can walk this one off. He keeps looking back toward the water, because rescuing her did not solve the real problem. At the hospital, Yue is put under observation, while the others finally get a chance to regroup. The monitors stay on her as the damage from the underwater fight begins to settle. Chairman Liu thanks Shinji personally, knowing Yue might not have made it back without him. But Shinji is more interested in what attacked her than in taking credit for the rescue. He explains that this creature behaved differently from the ordinary mutants they have already seen. The more he thinks about it, the more the same abnormal pattern keeps showing up. That leads into the real problem. Darkness attribute monsters are especially dangerous once they begin evolving. In deep water, one can hide its true body, absorb surrounding spiritual energy, and keep strengthening itself while nobody on land even sees it. Chairman Liu understands that a creature like that cannot be treated like another random outbreak. If it keeps feeding, the next encounter could cost far more than one injured cultivator. Shinji agrees to help, but he wants something in return before taking on that kind of target. Later that night, Fumi is finally off duty long enough to get into the bath. Even there, work follows her and the conversation quickly turns back to Shinji and the new mission. She argues that there is no reason to throw him into something this dangerous without proper support. Fumi keeps listening as the other side explains just how serious the threat has become. The warning is simple. If the situation behind these incidents is ignored, the damage will spread far beyond one city. She reaches for the pendant at her neck while thinking through the risk. By the time the call ends, her relaxed mood is completely gone. A car cuts through the city that night as the next operation starts moving. Shinji rides with a female officer while she brings him up to speed on the assignment. He asks what changed badly enough to pull everyone back out this quickly. She brings up the target area and the military's latest intelligence. Then she hands him the file so he can see the details for himself. Shinji makes it clear that if they want his help, he expects the military to actually cooperate instead of getting in the way. The officer's reaction says she was not expecting him to negotiate this casually. They arrive at a container port where soldiers have already locked down the waterfront. Shinji walks into the restricted area beside the officer while everyone else prepares around them. A group of soldiers lifts them over, not exactly thrilled that an outsider is joining the operation. Shinji barely reacts to the attitude. One senior soldier clearly does not like the idea of trusting a civilian cultivator with their mission. The officer pushes back before the argument can turn into a full-on ego contest. Shinji confirms that he is still going in. The soldiers finally move into position with him. The officer gets one last confirmation from him, and Shinji answers yes. And with the surface team ready, Shinji dives back into the water. The underwater team descends behind Shinji into a zone filled with distorted spiritual pressure. Purple tentacles move through the dark water ahead of them. One diver signals that visibility is dropping fast. Shinji's eyes sharpen as he searches for the creature's core. A blue barrier forms around his body to keep the pressure from slowing him. Yu, recovered enough to join the mission, signals that she is ready. Shinji tells everyone to stay close until they identify the attack pattern. Soldiers spread into formation behind them. Something moves outside their lights. A sudden strike slams into the formation. One fighter blocks and gets driven backward. The team reforms before a second attack can split them. Then the real monster emerges from the darkness. Its massive mouth opens wide enough to swallow a diver whole. Shinji fires a compressed water attack into its path. The team reacts before the creature can close its jaws. Blue and purple energy collide through the water. One soldier thinks they forced it back. Yue looks less convinced. Another fighter warns that nobody can maintain maximum output underwater for long. A tentacle shoots in from the side. The creature twists its body and comes again. The team bunches up to cover the injured. A broad blue wave forces the monster away from the formation. The commanding soldier reminds everyone that oxygen and stamina are now part of the fight. An ice strike follows the retreating creature. The dark-haired woman watches the current for another ambush. A tentacle snaps toward Shinji. He deflects it before it can wrap around his body. The mutant uses that opening to release a heavy purple blast. Shinji gets thrown across the water and has to recover before hitting the rocks. Yue sees the monster already turning toward him. Shinji decides the normal elemental rules are becoming a problem. Golden fire ignites around his hand even under the water. One soldier stares like physics just personally offended him. Shinji forces the spiritual flame to burn through energy instead of oxygen. The monster's corrupted body becomes visible inside the purple haze. Shinji activates his fire cultivation art at full output. A golden ring expands through the water. The flame strikes the creature without losing shape. Everyone nearby realizes his technique isn't ordinary fire at all. Shinji pulls the energy back around himself for one final rush. The flames spiral into a concentrated vortex. He drives the attack directly into the mutant's exposed center. The creature is swallowed by gold and blue light. A violent underwater explosion shakes the entire zone. When the current finally settles, Shinji looks at the collapsing mutant and allows himself a small smile. The underwater squad regroups after the explosion and checks who is still able to move. Military teams begin pulling the wounded toward the surface while Shinji searches the wreckage for signs of the corrupted core. One officer reports that the mutant is finally dead. Another member isn't celebrating yet because several divers are injured. Shinji helps stabilize the nearest casualty before the current can carry anyone away. The team gathers around the fallen creature and confirms the corruption has stopped spreading. A command officer starts recording the condition of everyone involved. Shinji supports one exhausted fighter while the others prepare to ascend. Looking back at the mutant, he realizes these incidents are becoming too coordinated to dismiss. A nearby officer asks whether something bigger could be behind them. Shinji says he doesn't know yet, and for once that answer bothers him more than the danger. The group begins moving upward to the dark water. Yue stays close, still recovering from her own earlier injuries. Shinji checks on her before increasing the pace. She signals that she can keep going. They rise through a column of bubbles toward the surface. Shinji carries a small piece of recovered spiritual material with him. At the control center, investigators start processing everything brought back from the river. A military official asks Shinji what he thinks the corruption is trying to accomplish. Shinji explains that repeated mutations usually mean somebody is testing methods or creating pressure on purpose. A senior officer listens from behind a desk. Beside him, a younger silver-haired officer seems much more interested in Shinji than the paperwork. The younger man jokes that Shinji looks disappointed the meeting doesn't include another monster. A formal greeting finally begins. The senior official explains that the military wants a direct line to him rather than competing through intermediaries. The silver-haired officer presents a set of reports from other abnormal zones. Shinji notices the pattern is spreading beyond association territory. A vehicle later carries him deeper into a major military compound. He arrives at a decorated command building under heavy security. An older general receives him personally. Shinji sits across from the men while soldiers remain close enough to react if the conversation goes badly. The general's first question is blunt enough to catch Shinji off guard. Then the older man laughs, apparently enjoying how hard it is to make the famous young cultivator uncomfortable. The mood turns serious when he explains that military intelligence has been tracking the same corruption. He shows Shinji evidence from several sites. The general says he needs someone who can recognize spiritual threats before normal sensors catch them. Shinji weighs the request instead of immediately refusing. A file reveals another purple-black phenomenon similar to the previous mutants. The general says they can provide access, manpower, and information if Shinji cooperates. Shinji studies him carefully, looking for the catch. The older man offers a direct mission authorization rather than a permanent enlistment. That makes the arrangement much more attractive. They seal the agreement with a handshake. Before Shinji leaves, the general tosses him a small weapon or baton as a test. Shinji catches it without looking impressed. The general watches his reaction. Shinji turns the object over in his hand and simply says he's got it. That night the ride home is quieter. He reads the first mission details on a tablet. The location is already showing abnormal energy. Shinji closes the report with a hard look, because whatever is causing these mutations is moving faster than everyone else realizes. At the hospital, doctors continue monitoring Yue after the recent underwater battles. One surgeon explains that her body is stable, but spiritual damage is interfering with normal recovery. Chairman Liu waits outside the room looking more guilty than tired. He blames himself for letting one of his people get pushed this far. Shinji arrives and immediately asks for the latest readings. After hearing the explanation, he tells Chairman Liu conventional recovery will take too long. His expression makes it clear he has another option. Inside the room, Yue lies unconscious while weak energy flickers around her. Chairman Liu apologizes for what happened. Shinji tells him regret can wait until she is awake. He enters the treatment room despite the staff's confusion. Medical workers try stopping him when he approaches the bed. A doctor argues that forcing spiritual energy into an unstable patient could kill her. Shinji takes her arm anyway and checks the flow directly. He explains that the damage is blocking circulation rather than destroying it. The staff panics when lightning begins forming around his hand. Then Chairman Liu steps in and tells them to let Shinji work. The doctor reluctantly backs off. Shinji leans over the patient and carefully controls the output. He prepares the same lightning that tears monsters apart, except now every mistake would hit an ally. Blue current flows into her body. Instead of attacking, the energy stimulates the blocked pathways one section at a time. Chairman Liu and Doctor watch the monitors change. A soft blue field settles around the bed. The system helps Shinji keep the flow beneath the dangerous threshold. Her spiritual circulation finally reconnects. The woman wakes suddenly, and Shinji catches her before she can fall out of bed. Lightning still flickers around them as her body finishes stabilizing. Shinji nearly collapses from the effort. She opens her eyes and realizes who has been sitting beside her. Later, the room is quiet enough for them to talk normally. She sits up and asks how long she was unconscious. Shinji smiles and tells her the important part is that she's recovering. She responds more softly than usual. Then he ruins the serious moment with a ridiculously confident pose. Her confused face is immediate. Shinji begins explaining that she now owes him several meals for medical services. The argument turns chibi-level dramatic almost instantly. She blushes, then tells him not to push his luck. Shinji raises one finger and keeps negotiating anyway. Sometime later, another mission brings them into the forest after reports of an aggressive red boar-like mutant. A burst of fire drops the creature before it reaches the team. Shinji scans the surrounding trees rather than celebrating. He and Yue stop to rest after the pursuit. She asks whether the earlier mutation reports could be connected to this one too. Shinji laughs that apparently monsters also refuse to give him recovery days. Then they find poisoned red-black residue on the ground. Both immediately become serious. Shinji senses the same corrupted energy from the previous outbreaks. He stands and follows the trail because the forest mission just became something much bigger than hunting one mutant. Not far away, a group of young people is camping in the forest with no idea what is spreading toward them. A blonde guy sits with a pink-haired girl and their friends, acting like the trip belongs to him. The girl drinks and complains while everyone argues over something completely normal. For a moment, it is just another peaceful weekend. The blonde man starts boasting about how easily he could handle the awakened world if anything happened. One friend encourages him because apparently confidence needs witnesses. Then somebody notices a strange glow deeper in the trees. The group walks over to investigate instead of doing the sensible thing and leaving. The blonde points out a purple plant growing alone in the path. Its surface is pulsing with spiritual energy. He studies it like he just discovered free treasure. The plant begins blooming as he gets closer. One of the girls checks a message or warning, but the timing is terrible. The blonde reaches out and touches the growth. Purple light enters his eyes immediately. Something monstrous forms in the shadow behind him. Black-red corruption spreads across the ground from his feet. The blonde starts laughing even though nobody said anything funny. A cocoon of red energy wraps around his body. When it breaks, what comes out barely looks human. The campers finally understand that whatever is wearing their friend's body is now hunting them. The transformed creature roars and sends the campers running. A purple slash tears through the trees behind them. One girl screams as the attack cuts off their escape. Another blast shatters the ground near the group. The pink-haired girl stares at the thing that used to be her friend. Everyone panics when they realize he is not controlling the transformation. She calls to him anyway. The creature answers with another burst of corrupted energy. The forest around the campsite becomes completely silent. Then Shinji and Yu reach the area. Shinji catches an injured civilian before the person can collapse. A red blur attacks them from the side. He blocks the first strike while the woman pulls the survivor away. She helps the victim retreat behind cover. Corrupted vines crawl over nearby trees and begin sealing the clearing. Shinji releases lightning to cut them back. Yua asks whether the transformed man can still be saved. Shinji tells her to protect the civilians while he finds out. The monster rushes him with another red attack. Shinji counters at close range. A green-shirted camper watches from behind the group, stunned by how fast the fight moves. The corrupted man hits the ground but immediately starts getting back up. For an instant, part of his human face returns. Yu warns that the mutation is changing again. Shinji recognizes the corruption becoming denser instead of disappearing. Red power condenses around the victim's body. The creature rises in an even more unstable form. Shinji tells the others to keep their distance because the next transformation may destroy whatever human control is left. A towering red aura swallows the clearing, confirming the fight is nowhere near finished. The transformed man laughs inside the red aura like the corruption has completely taken over his mind. Shinji steps into the pressure and tells him the rampage ends here. A red slash comes first. The mutant actually smiles when Shinji blocks it. Shinji realizes the corrupted body is learning from every exchange. The creature charges again with brute force. Shinji avoids the tackle and strikes from the side. Lightning wraps around his next counter. The impact finally knocks the mutant down. One of the campers approaches, thinking the danger is over. Shinji immediately orders everyone to stay back. He explains that the corruption is still active inside the victim. The pink-haired girl looks toward her friend with growing fear. Shinji and Yue keep watching his spiritual signature. The blonde man kneels alone as the red aura starts fading. Then, his eyes turn purple. A shadow rises behind him. Black-purple energy pulls itself out of his body like a second creature being born. The blonde can only stare at the thing leaving him. A dark weapon-like mass forms inside the corruption. Purple energy covers his face. Then the shadow swallows him completely. Shinji notices the change before anyone else understands it. The new entity rises as a true demon-like mutant. He pushes Yue behind him before the first attack lands. Dark energy explodes across the clearing. The ground itself becomes stained by the corruption. Purple tendrils shoot toward the surviving campers. The blonde victim disappears deeper into the shadow body. Shinji spots a dense purple core forming near the ground. The purple core pulses once, and every remaining tendril reacts like it is receiving the same command. The entity towers above them with a completely different pressure from the red form. He orders the civilians to move while there is still space to escape. Shinji steadies himself and prepares for a fight against the thing controlling the corruption rather than its host. The shadow monster turns directly toward him. A roar shakes the forest. Shinji attacks first before it can gather more power. The entity moves faster than its size suggests. A purple spear-like strike cuts through his path. Shinji answers with fire. Dark tendrils split around the flames and attack from several angles. Yue moves in to support him. The demon pushes forward without slowing. Shinji's eyes glow as he changes the rhythm of the fight. The creature releases its full body into the clearing. A compressed purple projectile forms above it. Yue shouts a warning. The dark sphere expands until it covers most of the sky above them. She throws up an ice technique to slow the attack. The demon forces through the barrier. Shinji drives fire and lightning into the opening she created. Blue, gold, and purple energy collide in the center of the forest. The demon holds against Shinji's mixed attack and tries forcing the collision back toward the civilians. Yue adds her own energy from the side. Shinji checks that she isn't overextending while keeping pressure on the core. She looks worried because the shadow is absorbing far more punishment than expected. Shinji changes the angle and cuts through the corruption with a fire lightning slash. The demon finally loses part of its body. A wider blue strike tears open the shadow around its center. The explosion shakes the trees and throws corrupted fragments everywhere. The creature crashes to the ground. Shinji looks relieved for about 1 second. The demon starts rising again. A dark lash whips toward him from the broken body. He dodges and closes the distance before it can reform. A second strike lands directly on the core. The shadow roars and tries expanding one last time. Shinji stands over it instead of retreating. His eyes narrow as he prepares to purge the corruption completely. The demon hisses out a final threat, proving there is intelligence behind this power. Its body begins dissolving into purple residue. Shinji studies the remains, realizing the corruption may be part of something organized. Then he releases a massive lightning purge into everything left. The shadow skeleton convulses inside the blue current. One final blast wipes the residue from the clearing. Shinji stands inside the fading lightning and confirms the spiritual signature is gone. The campers rush toward the survivors now that the threat is actually dead. Yu drops to one knee from exhaustion. Later, an ominous storm gathers over the city. Crowds begin noticing strange shapes moving above the buildings. Emergency reports spread through news channels and association monitors. Yue reaches a cordon street and takes a call. The caller warns that flying mutants are appearing across several districts at once. An alley ahead goes dark. A red-eyed bat creature drops from the rooftops. She raises her hand and attacks before it reaches the civilians. A blue slash knocks the mutant out of the air. Then she looks up and realizes one bat was never the problem. More silhouettes are covering the nearby roofs. A second figure watches the swarm from above. The scare of the outbreak is ridiculous enough to erase any thought of handling it alone. Shinji's phone rings while he is still recovering from the forest fight. He answers just as the first huge wave fills the sky. Hundreds of bats pour between the buildings. People on the streets start running as emergency alarms spread. Shinji listens to the report and realizes the timing matches the shadow entity's destruction. He explains that these mutants may be reacting to the same corrupted source. The swarm descends toward the city center. For a moment, entire blocks vanish beneath beating wings. Red eyes glow inside the moving darkness. And somewhere within the swarm, Shinji can sense a denser core guiding the rest. Military convoys seal off the worst districts while the bat outbreak keeps spreading. Soldiers establish defensive lines beneath a sky that is getting darker by the minute. Command teams track the swarm across a city map and start marking every reported attack. Fumi studies the movement patterns from the operations room. Screens keep filling with new red zones faster than crews can clear the old ones. A silver-haired military officer stays in the phone coordinating reinforcements. Even the experienced commanders are exhausted by how many incidents erupted at once. Nobody can tell whether the bats are fleeing something or following orders. Fumi narrows her eyes at a cluster moving toward the city center. A hospital and several evacuation routes sit directly in its path. Shinji arrives at command with Yue beside him. A dark-haired officer meets them and immediately starts explaining the situation. Shinji studies the map without wasting time on introductions. The women compare field reports while he searches for the densest spiritual reading. The tattooed fighter shows up and greets Shinji like this is somehow another training session. Shinji tells him the bats probably won't respect sparring rules. The association chairman enters and calls everyone to the main table. A senior military commander joins the briefing through the secure display. The city map is divided into several combat sectors. Shinji and the tattooed man point out that concentrating everyone in one place will leave civilians exposed elsewhere. The women start matching teams to the districts with the highest casualty risk. A detailed urban grid appears on the screen. Several routes light up as the swarm changes direction. The silver-haired officer explains which sectors still have functioning evacuation corridors. Kaori asks what happens if a high-level mutant appears between teams. The commander admits they do not have enough elite fighters to cover every possibility. She studies the map and offers to take one of the worst districts. Tactical ranges and response times are calculated again. The tattooed man complains that his assignment is too far from the action. Shinji reminds him the people in that sector would probably prefer to survive quietly. The red-haired and dark-haired women settle their own routes. A new alert hits the tattooed man's phone. The commander receives the same update on the main display. Several of the women exchange worried looks. A larger swarm has appeared over a restricted district. The commander's face hardens as he orders a full split deployment. Chairman Liu looks at Shinji, knowing he is about to argue for something riskier. Shinji crosses his arms and studies the moving core again. The commander demands that he follow the assigned route. Shinji raises one finger and proposes a different approach. Chairman Liu backs him because the bats are clearly moving around a central source. The commander hates the gamble, but cannot dismiss the pattern. The tattooed man finally realizes every team will have to operate independently. The women agree that splitting up is the only way to keep the city from collapsing. Blue energy begins gathering around Shinji as he prepares to head directly toward the swarm's center. Shinji's route takes him toward an underground access tunnel beneath the infected district. A squad enters behind him with weapons raised. His sharpened senses catch movement long before the soldiers hear anything. The tunnel opens into a huge service platform already marked by battle damage. A commanding officer orders the troops to spread out. Shinji watches the darkness ahead instead of the formation behind him. Soldiers advance through the corridor. The first volley of orange energy and gunfire tears into the incoming swarm. Purple bats dive through the shots and force the line backward. The dark-haired woman shouts for the rear units to cover the evacuation path. Fumi takes a hit and keeps moving anyway. Above ground, bats blanket the skyline in every direction. A massive blue shockwave suddenly clears one lane through the swarm. Shinji arrives inside the strike with lightning still trailing from his body. He lands between the civilians and the next wave. The women spot him and immediately adjust the formation around his position. Blue energy curls off Shinji's arms while he scans for the controlling presence. Yue looks relieved to see him in one piece. The dark-haired officer is more surprised by how quickly he crossed the sector. Shinji warns them that the swarm is only a screen. Something much stronger is standing behind the bats. The nearby fighters regroup around him. He says the next attack will come from the center rather than the sky. Fumi orders the soldiers to hold civilians behind cover. A dark cluster opens farther down the street. A blonde corrupted man steps out smiling like he personally organized the disaster. The wounded officer glares at him and realizes this is no random mutant. Soldiers around them listen as the stranger starts talking. The blonde man openly mocks the defenders for wasting energy on disposable creatures. Shinji moves first before the speech can become a full villain presentation. His strike cuts across the enemy's body. Fumi stares when the blonde man barely reacts. Dark energy closes around the wound and his smile gets wider. The enemy powers up instead of retreating. The officer launches a blue ice attack from the side. Shinji adds a compressed energy shot into the same opening. Blue power collides with the enemy's purple shield. The blonde man forms a spear-like blast and drives it back toward them. A military officer shouts for everyone to clear the center lane. Shinji accelerates through the attack. A purple slash nearly catches him from behind. Lightning crashes down between both fighters. Shinji steps out of the flash with his eyes locked on the enemy. The bats circle overhead as if they are waiting for a command. A giant mutant drops out of the swarm. The dark-haired woman braces for impact. A black projectile forms beneath the creature. Shinji steps in front of the others. Fumi watches the attack gather and realizes the blonde enemy is coordinating both threats. He releases another corrupted wave at the same time. A giant dark eye-like core opens above the battlefield. Shinji fires lightning straight into the center before the two attacks can merge. Blue electricity engulfs him as the entire street erupts in light. Shinji keeps the corrupted enemy pinned, while the rest of the team handles the swarm around them. He tells Fumi to stay behind the defensive line until her injury stops slowing her reactions. The bats keep circling overhead instead of scattering, which confirms someone is still controlling them. Shinji looks up and tracks the spiritual threads connecting the swarm. The officer refuses to leave and takes position nearby anyway. The fighters exchange a quick plan before the next wave arrives. Red-black energy begins rising from the enemy side of the street. A massive tendril stretches across the sky above the buildings. Shinji's weapon starts glowing as he prepares to cut through it. Soldiers below finally understand how large the attack really is. Officers shout for everyone to move away from its shadow. Shinji swings before the tendril can fall. He looks upward as the energies collide above the street. The soldiers panic when fragments of corrupted power rain down around them. Shinji holds his ground and searches for the caster inside the chaos. Another ally tries reaching him through the interference. A wounded fighter answers from behind cover. The enemy launches a compact purple projectile straight through the opening. A blue diamond-like barrier catches it before it reaches the team. The skyline disappears behind the explosion. Shinji uses the cover and leaps onto the rooftops. A huge web of blue energy spreads from his landing point. The blonde enemy gets caught by the edge and is thrown backward. Pink-purple energy wraps around one of the wounded combatants below. The bats still refuse to retreat. Shinji lands and checks the injured officer beside him. Then a giant purple slash tears across the sky. Lightning bursts around Shinji as he intercepts it. The blonde enemy's smile finally fades. A blue beam crashes toward him from the flank. Another purple-haired fighter begins channeling a spell from the opposite side. The corrupted man braces under attacks from multiple directions. The nearby allies realize they finally forced him to defend. Shinji drives a lightning-charged weapon strike through the opening. The enemy answers with purple flame rather than normal blood. A soldier gets caught by the backlash and falls. Shinji and another fighter push in before the corrupted body can rebuild. Fumi calls out the enemy's exposed side. A blue attack blocks the next counter. Shinji refuses to give the blonde man room to command the swarm again. The military unit closes around the battlefield. The purple-haired woman keeps her eyes on the core instead of the body. Shinji coordinates one final approach with the officer beside him. One injured soldier is pulled clear as the attack begins. The corrupted enemy drops to one knee. Dark energy flickers across his face. Shinji watches carefully, expecting another transformation. The surrounding team holds position instead of rushing in. The enemy's aura finally begins collapsing. Shinji's eyes stay hard until the last purple thread disappears. Only then does the group let itself believe the immediate fight is over. The last traces of purple energy retreat from the battlefield instead of vanishing completely. A final orb shoots away from the defeated enemy and disappears into the sky. Everyone looks up, realizing part of the corruption escaped, yet tracks the fading point until it leaves her senses. A second projectile from the team misses it by seconds. A red-black slash tears through the remaining monsters below. The dark-haired woman finishes one of the stragglers. Shinji regroups with the others and immediately asks about casualties. The last corrupted creature is eliminated near the edge of the street. A red strike clears the area for medics. The women help move the wounded towards safer ground. Yue checks a call from command. Shinji looks over while trying to understand where the escaped energy went. He gives a small smile when command confirms most civilians survived. Then he notices another red silhouette in the distance and the relief disappears. Fumi follows his gaze. Later, the team gathers inside for a full intelligence briefing. A red-haired officer listens while reports are laid across the table. The commander explains that multiple mutations share the same corrupted signature. Shinji and several senior officials compare the recent locations. A blue uniform officer brings up missing information from military archives. Another official looks increasingly uncomfortable. The command center fills with screens showing every recorded incident. A mustached administrator argues that the association is overreacting. Shinji watches the room rather than the display. A senior officer points at evidence that the corruption is moving deliberately. Kaori studies the map. An intelligence report connects several events to an unknown organization operating around awakened zones. Several locations on the map line up with disappearances that began before the public mutations ever started. Shinji listens from the rear while the officials argue over jurisdiction. One officer laughs at the idea that a secret group could influence mutants on this scale. The tattooed man and Shinji exchange a look that says they have both seen enough impossible things lately. The tattooed fighter checks a new message on his phone. A senior commander appears on the main monitor. The women whisper about another sector going silent. A projection shows an image captured near one of the earlier purple outbreaks. Chairman Liu addresses the room and demands a joint response. Shinji crosses his arms, already expecting the military objection. The commander says splitting resources based on unverified theories is reckless. Shinji raises one finger and asks what happens if waiting gives the enemy another citywide outbreak. Chairman Liu supports him. The older commander gets visibly angry but cannot answer the casualty numbers. The tattooed man reacts when a fresh alarm cuts through the room. The women realize multiple teams will need to deploy again. Shinji begins gathering blue energy before the meeting is even dismissed. Kaori watches him head for the door. A purple image from the latest site appears on the main screen. One young official studies the distorted shape in silence. The commander warns everyone that the new reading is stronger than the previous one. A field camera finally comes online. A purple monster is forming inside the restricted zone. Shinji arrives wrapped in lightning and faces it before the transformation can finish. A towering purple armored creature completes its transformation in front of Shinji. The horned body radiates enough pressure to force nearby soldiers backward. A silver-haired military officer wipes blood from his mouth and keeps watching anyway. Civilians are evacuated through streets already damaged by the last outbreak. Shinji steps into the combat zone alone long enough to draw the creature's attention. The demon attacks immediately. Blue lightning from the supporting team strikes its armor and barely slows it. A soldier blocks the next rush just long enough for others to move. The creature forms a dense purple energy ball in one hand. Command watches the fight on delayed screens from a bunker. Shinji answers by charging lightning through his weapon. The women sprint toward the battlefield from another sector. He lands the first clean hit on the armored body. The silver-haired officer sees the crack and calls out the opening. Purple and blue auras collide around the monster's chest. Kaori arrives with another attack. A vertical blue slash tears across the armor. A male ally adds purple flame from the side. The corrupted creature beneath the shell roars. Its true body pushes through the damaged armor. A purple spear-like beam launches across the street. Shinji and the others cross their attacks to stop it. The demon forms an enormous purple sword above its arm. Shinji avoids the first swing by jumping inside the arc. A red eye opens through the broken helmet. The counter-attack releases a red slash to the ground. The armored demon boasts with the confidence of something that has survived every hit so far. Several purple orbs appear around the field. The team forms a defensive circle before the bombardment begins. Energy crashes down from multiple directions. Shinji looks upward and counts the timing between impacts. An orange-gold blast clears one of the orbs before it detonates. The demon roars when its attack pattern gets interrupted. Shinji sends a long-range slash through the opening. A blue wave cuts across the creature's torso. Yu gathers another blue technique. The demon charges its largest purple attack yet. One soldier looks exactly as terrified as everyone else feels. He points at the energy mass growing above the street. Shinji smiles because the monster just exposed its core to gather that much power. He launches before the demon can release it. A multi-element strike crashes directly through the center. The battlefield disappears behind the explosion. Later, Shinji reaches the hospital where Chairman Liu is recovering from the chaos. Residual lightning still flickers around the medical equipment from another treatment session. Shinji enters the room and finds several officials already there. Chairman Liu sits wrapped in his usual dark clothing and somehow still looks ready to argue policy. A doctor finishes checking him while Shinji waits. Chairman Liu makes a joke about Shinji bringing trouble everywhere he goes. Shinji's deadpan response makes it clear he thinks Chairman Liu has that backward. Then the older man's expression sharpens. The latest attacks prove somebody is escalating and he wants Shinji prepared for the next move. The next joint meeting between the association and military starts tense before everyone even sits down. A blue uniform officer presents the latest incident report on the main screen. He makes a comment about the association arriving late and Chairman Liu immediately fires back. A tall military officer watches the exchange with zero patience. People around the table realize this briefing is becoming a turf war again. One official argues that awakened operations need a single chain of command. An older officer points directly at the association's recent failures. Chairman Liu's eyes narrow. He reminds them that military containment has failed more than once, too. The red-haired officer stands and tries stopping the argument from getting worse. A cap-wearing commander stays silent while measuring everyone in the room. Another official interrupts with accusations about unauthorized operations. The tall officer threatens to pull military support from joint missions. Shinji listens from nearby and looks increasingly bored by people arguing while monsters keep evolving. One officer demands that the association answer for Shinji's independence. Chairman Liu refuses to treat Shinji like property. The whole table erupts again. Chairman Liu even keeps talking while casually holding his drink, which somehow makes the military side angrier. Two officials whisper about forcing a formal ruling. Another officer openly challenges Chairman Liu's authority. The cap-wearing commander finally steps in. A younger official stands and tries bringing the discussion back to the actual threat. Chairman Liu agrees and returns to the incident data. The room settles just enough to continue. One smug officer immediately tries provoking the association again. The cap-wearing commander looks annoyed that nobody learned anything in the last 30 seconds. Several soldiers laugh at a remark made across the table. Chairman Liu gives them a completely deadpan stare. The mocking officer keeps smiling. A shadowed official at the end of the room finally speaks. Two military men exchange a serious look. Chairman Liu steps closer to one of the officers instead of backing down. The argument turns personal. A pressure test begins when the officer grabs for him. Shinji catches the movement and stops it before the confrontation becomes a brawl. The cap-wearing commander warns everyone to stand down. One uniformed man insults Shinji for interfering. Shinji knocks his hand away and reminds him this is supposed to be a strategy meeting. He steps back before anybody can claim he started it. The cap-wearing officer studies Shinji differently after seeing the reaction speed up close. Later, Shinji leaves the building with Chairman Liu. Chairman Liu follows him outside and finally starts laughing about the ridiculous meeting. Shinji looks way too happy to be done with it. Then Chairman Liu hands him another document. Shinji's smile disappears while he reads. He looks at the older man like the paper personally betrayed him. Chairman Liu gestures that the assignment is not optional if Shinji wants continued access to military intelligence. He explains the target and location. Shinji's answer is a full-volume complaint that apparently being useful just means everyone keeps finding more work for him. A military vehicle races toward the next assignment while Shinji reviews the equipment sitting beside him. The cap-wearing officer and a red-haired soldier ride with him, still not entirely comfortable after the meeting. They arrive outside a secure district connected to a wealthy estate and training facility. Shinji steps out to a crowd already staring at the convoy. The cap-wearing officer explains the purpose of the visit. The red-haired soldier checks the time and tells everyone to keep moving. Another officer confirms their contact is waiting inside. Shinji smiles and says he would love one mission where the contact isn't surrounded by armed guards. The cap-wearing man gives him a suspicious look. A bespectacled young man in a white shirt finally approaches. The officers introduce both sides. Shinji keeps the greeting polite while studying the stranger's spiritual pressure. The group enters the enormous estate grounds. Their host starts explaining the property and recent abnormal activity. Staff and security gather around the entrance. A young woman nearby listens without interrupting. A tactical display shows several places inside the estate where sensors failed. The team moves toward the main building. Shinji senses something wrong before anybody sees a monster. One officer confronts the host about information missing from the report. The escort group tightens around them. They reach a stairwell where the air suddenly turns heavy. A red mutant beast explodes out of the darkness. The red-haired soldier gets hit before the squad can form up. Shinji shouts a warning and moves toward the creature. One guard releases fire to force it back. The cap-wearing officer closes his eyes for a second and listens to the movement. The white-shirted man takes a defensive stance instead of retreating. A blue-haired girl nearby looks terrified by how quickly the situation changed. Shinji and the officers spread across the hall. The cap-wearing commander attacks with a golden flame technique. The red beast crashes through it. Several soldiers finally realize this target is stronger than the report suggested. The mutant lunges for the injured group. Shinji draws a red weapon and cuts across its path. The cap-wearing officer looks shocked by the speed of the intercept. The beast roars and turns towards Shinji. The commander watches the kid he argued with earlier take control of the exchange. People in the courtyard start moving toward cover. One officer tries figuring out where the creature came from. Shinji and the cap-wearing man argue over whether to chase it deeper into the estate. The red-haired soldier says waiting here only gives the mutant time to recover. The officers regroup around the wounded. A dark doorway ahead suddenly cracks open. Shinji's lightning cuts off another attack from inside. A vertical blue slash lights the corridor. He raises the red weapon and tells everyone the real threat is farther in. The officers fall in behind him. Shinji warns them to stop assuming the building is secure just because humans still own the deed. The cap-wearing commander looks toward the darkness. Inside, injured people are already lying across the floor. The overhead corridor disappears into shadow, confirming something has been hunting through the estate before they arrived. The estate looks peaceful from outside, which is impressive considering the inside has become a supernatural murder maze. Shinji leads the group through the dark hall and keeps everyone away from the walls. Something moves above them. The white-shirted man releases green energy and reveals that he is far from an ordinary civilian. Shinji draws his red weapon in response to the pressure ahead. His eyes catch traces of corruption hiding across the floor. Green light collides with a purple pulse coming from deeper inside. The hostile energy spreads toward the team. Shinji watches the ground for a trigger instead of the ceiling. The cap-wearing officer and red-haired soldier argue about which route to take. Shinji smiles when one corridor gives off a stronger signal. The group enters a sealed chamber. Several bodies and broken traps cover the room. A guard points toward fresh marks across the wall. The cap-wearing officer orders everyone into a tighter formation. Red spectral claws suddenly form above the floor. A dragon-like mutant erupts from the chamber. One soldier gets grabbed before he can dodge. A blue strike hits the creature's side. The impact forces it to release the man. The dragon answers with a wave of red energy. A black and gold defense catches part of the attack. Another fighter tries reinforcing the barrier. The red-haired officer screams for everyone to move. The creature snaps its jaws through the broken defense. Crimson claw marks tear across the room. A purple figure or energy source appears behind the beast. Shinji answers with a burning gold slash. The cap-wearing officer attacks from the opposite side. The dragon knocks him away with its tail. Golden energy gathers around Shinji and the white-shirted man at once. The host's green power intensifies as he joins the fight properly. One officer gets thrown across the floor. Shinji's lightning crashes into the dragon's back. The creature rises again despite the combined hit. The team regroups and realizes brute force is not finishing it. Blood spreads across the floor from the injured. The dragon's red eyes lock onto the weakest target. One soldier struggles to stand. The remaining fighters pull back into the hallway. Shinji stops beside one survivor and checks whether the corruption entered the wound. The cap-wearing officer reacts when he sees the same dark residue from earlier incidents. Two men argue about whether the beast is being controlled. Another injured fighter collapses to one knee. The commander asks Shinji what he plans to do. Shinji activates the red weapon and tells everyone to get clear. A red strike sweeps across the chamber. A huge magic circle appears beneath the dragon. Energy begins spiraling upward from the pattern. The pattern locks into place beneath everyone, proving the entire chamber was designed as an activation site. Something is being summoned through the ritual. A crimson blast fills the entire room. When the light fades, the ritual circle is still active, meaning killing the dragon was never the whole problem. Blue lightning explodes across the ritual chamber before the next summon can fully form. A red energy slash answers from the other side. Shinji tells the soldiers the circle has to be broken before they worry about the creature standing on it. The red-haired officer argues that they cannot reach it through the dragon. The cap-wearing commander looks just as unhappy with the options. Outside, the courtyard has become covered in glowing cracks from the ritual. The team gathers around Shinji while he searches for the weak point. A clock or marker on the estate shows how long the phenomenon has been active. The officers start losing patience as the energy continues rising. Shinji senses movement behind them. Red barriers snap into place across the courtyard. The dragon charges through one before the soldiers can reposition. An officer screams for the rear line to move. The group scatters around the attack. A red slash carves through the space they just abandoned. Shinji grins when the beast exposes the ritual mark beneath its feet. The dragon swings at the soldiers to force him away. The cap-wearing commander realizes Shinji is baiting it. Shinji catches one injured fighter and pulls him clear. The courtyard opens enough for the team to spread out. The commander finally releases his own blue lightning technique. Purple sparks flicker in his eyes as the power stabilizes. Shinji raises his hand and times the next attack with him. The dragon rears back over the ritual circle. A lightning beam slams into its chest. Blue current wraps around Shinji as he rushes behind the blast. His red weapon slices through one of the ritual anchors. The dragon finally shows a real wound. The cap-wearing officer and nearby soldiers stare at how quickly Shinji switched targets. He follows with another lightning burst. A huge blue slash crashes down through the corrupted mark. Golden energy gathers for the finishing sequence. The dragon throws out a wing of black flame. A red bite snaps towards Shinji's shoulder. He drives the gold lightning attack straight through the opening. A red cross of energy explodes above the courtyard. The dragon roars and tries to stay airborne. Shinji steps around another desperate strike. The beast's face twists as the ritual beneath it begins collapsing. Shinji forms a cross-shaped lightning attack and releases it through the center. A golden orb flashes inside the creature's body. The cap-wearing officer sees the core destabilize. The dragon sends one last red slash at the team. Soldiers brace behind the remaining cover. Shinji stands after the explosion and confirms the creature is finally going down. The red-haired officer looks between him and the destroyed ritual. The cap-wearing commander lowers his weapon and exhales for the first time in several minutes. Shinji checks the ground for any surviving corruption. The final red glow fades from the estate. The team's relief lasts until the red-winged creature twitches again. One of the officers raises a weapon, expecting another round. The cap-wearing commander asks whether the ritual is really finished. Shinji tells him the circle is dead, but the monster still has energy left. Then the white-shirted man releases a green slash into the beast. One officer starts celebrating when it lands. The man in white simply smiles like he has been waiting to show what he can do. Shinji looks at him with new interest. The group realizes their quiet host has been hiding a serious awakened ability. Shinji asks whether he planned to keep that secret through the entire mission. The cap-wearing officer watches both of them, already sensing another competition forming. The red-haired soldier comments that men apparently cannot survive one crisis without measuring each other. The white-shirted man tears off his damaged outer layer and releases a stronger green aura. Even the military officers are impressed by the pressure. He explains that his technique focuses spiritual power into a concentrated defensive and cutting field. A green sigil forms in front of his hand. The wounded bird-like dragon gathers red and green energy around its core. The man in white answers with green lightning. Shinji raises his red weapon at the same time. The creature staggers, but refuses to collapse. A red beam shoots toward Shinji. A green shield appears and blocks it. One officer behind them realizes the two strongest fighters just started cooperating without discussing anything. Red energy crashes into the green barrier again. The shield holds. The cap-wearing commander and another soldier move to cover the flanks. Shinji changes his grip and prepares the next attack. The white-shirted man's eyes glow green. Both men step forward together. Shinji slices through the creature's wing. The green technique wraps around the wound before it can regenerate. The man in white makes a joke about Shinji finally keeping up. A huge burst of fire and lightning answers for him. The white-shirted fighter follows with another green strike. Shinji's red weapon carves across the burning creature. The bird disappears inside orange flame. The man in white braces behind his shield when the creature explodes outward. Green energy wraps his entire body. The mutant forms one final fireball. Shinji and his temporary rival coordinate their timing. The creature releases the sphere. The white-shirted man drives his green power straight into it. A final explosion consumes the remaining mutant. Shinji lowers his weapon after the light clears. The cap-wearing commander looks at the white-shirted man with a very different level of respect. After the mission, Shinji catches the white-shirted man's attention before anyone can leave. The surrounding officers immediately realize the two are not finished with each other. The cap-wearing commander looks worried about where this is going. The man in white smiles and accepts the unspoken challenge. Shinji agrees to a controlled spar rather than pretending he isn't curious. His opponent steps forward with complete confidence. An older muscular observer watches from the side. Green energy begins wrapping around the white-shirted fighter. Shinji takes position without drawing full power yet. The man smirks and tells him not to hold back too much. His aura grows denser around both arms. Shinji studies the way the energy is being shaped. The cap-wearing officer realizes the technique is stronger than what they saw during the monster fight. Both fighters settle into range. A green blade forms in the man's hand. He attacks first with a straight beam. The slash expands across the courtyard. Shinji slips outside the center rather than blocking it. His opponent turns the miss into a second attack. Shinji catches the green spear-like strike and redirects it. The force still drives debris across the ground. Shinji answers with fire and lightning at once. Red and gold energy wrap around his stance. The white-shirted man calls out his next technique. Green shields form in layers around him. Shinji's mixed attack crashes into the defense. The barrier bends, but does not break. He switches to a blue lightning-enhanced weapon strike. The opponent looks almost pleased that Shinji increased the pressure. Green projectiles spread around the courtyard. The cap-wearing commander comments that either fighter could flatten the training area if this keeps escalating. The white-shirted man absorbs one impact and glows orange from the heat. He beats his chest and refuses to retreat. Then he announces one more move. Shinji's expression sharpens. Green spikes begin converging from multiple directions. A blue lightning pulse explodes from Shinji's body. His opponent braces inside the technique. A giant green cage closes around them. Shinji detonates a blue counter from inside. Both fighters pause inside the broken field for one breath, then step forward at the same time. The man in white staggers when the cage breaks. He starts laughing even while blood runs from his mouth. Shinji lands the final clean strike before the spar becomes something worse. The white-shirted fighter drops to one knee, defeated but still smiling like he got exactly what he wanted. The white-shirted fighter refuses to stay down and releases another surge of green power. He throws his head back as the energy jumps to a level the officers were not expecting. A new green blade forms in his hand. He drives it toward the ground and changes the entire battlefield. A huge magic circle spreads beneath Shinji. Shinji watches it activate without panicking. Green weapons form across the pattern. He answers with a red-blue slash before they can close. The opponent unleashes his named finishing technique. A cage of green light collapses inward. Shinji's red attack tears open one section of the field. The man in white gets thrown to the ground. Shinji stands over him with the red weapon ready. Then a green barrier reforms around the fallen fighter. He screams and forces his body back up. The barrier shatters outward. Green energy bursts from him in every direction. Shinji explains that stronger output won't fix the flaw he already found. A series of green slashes comes at him anyway. The white-shirted man tries covering every escape route. Shinji waits for the web to tighten. Then he slips through the one gap created by the technique itself. His opponent hits the ground for real this time. Before anyone can celebrate, a red-orange disturbance appears near the defeated mutant bird. Shinji senses the surviving core react. Lightning begins wrapping around him again. His eyes track the creature as it moves. Orange fire gathers around the remains. The corrupted core collides with the green energy left in the area. The white-shirted man gets thrown clear. Shinji answers with a blue strike. The final exchange leaves his sparring partner completely unable to continue. The officers stare at the destruction across the courtyard. Then the supposedly dead bird starts moving again. The creature inhales and prepares another fire attack. Shinji turns toward it with visible annoyance. A red-winged body rises from the smoke. He steps forward before it can regain altitude. The rest of the team shouts warnings. A fiery projectile launches toward him. The bird forces itself into the air. Shinji gathers his own flame. Several officers watch like they have given up expecting normal elemental rules. He catches the weakened creature at close range. A massive burst of fire explodes around both of them. Shinji stands inside the orange glow without moving. The bird becomes a black silhouette in the flames. When the fire fades, the officers finally start talking again. Shinji rejoins the group looking exhausted. His expression says he would appreciate it if defeated enemies stayed defeated for at least one afternoon. Shinji returns with the small red bird-like remnant still following him around. The cap-wearing officer and a red-haired soldier stare at the creature like nobody explained the pet policy. An older man asks why Shinji brought the mutant back instead of destroying it. The tattooed fighter thinks the whole thing is hilarious. Shinji gives him a look that ends the commentary. Another official studies the bird for signs of corruption. A decorated officer joins the discussion. The military side wants the creature monitored. Shinji agrees as long as nobody tries dissecting it while he is looking. A report about the estate incident spreads quickly. The footage spreads with the report, making Shinji's name impossible for senior officials to ignore. Senior officers read the results and realize the number of awakened fighters involved keeps increasing. Shinji recognizes one name inside the paperwork. An officer slams the report onto his desk in frustration. A bespectacled official argues that the joint missions are creating dangerous independent actors. The decorated man says the alternative is letting mutants evolve without resistance. Another officer dramatically sinks into his chair. An older official listens without choosing a side. Back at Shinji's home, the mood is much less official. Yue sees the tiny red bird perched on Shinji's head. Shinji walks inside pretending this is completely normal. The dark-haired woman notices too and immediately starts laughing. Both women gather around the creature with way too much interest. The bird stares back like it already regrets following Shinji. The women ask whether he actually plans to keep it. Shinji looks annoyed at how fast his apartment has become a public attraction. He explains the creature's corruption disappeared after the battle. Yue reads the notes he brought back. Both women exchange a look that says they are already naming the bird without him. Shinji catches them and objects. The argument becomes embarrassingly dramatic. He tries covering his head when the bird refuses to move. Both women stare at him in perfect synchronized disbelief. Shinji drinks water and pretends none of this is happening. Later, he starts getting dressed for another association gathering. Night settles over the city. The little bird watches from the room like a suspicious red security camera. One of the women pokes it and gets an offended response. At a banquet, military and association figures finally meet somewhere without monsters attacking the table. Naturally, they still spend most of dinner talking about combat. Shinji sits through the conversation looking more awkward than he does in actual fights. Then he is called into a private office. An official is already waiting with another report. A younger officer joins the meeting. Yue arrives soon after. Shinji realizes this is not a social invitation. A blue uniform officer presents evidence from the latest corruption site. A blonde official brings up a related military project. The group studies the information together. A projection shows another purple energy incident. The cap-wearing commander enters midway through the briefing. Several officers stand to acknowledge him. He studies Shinji in silence. The blonde official explains what they need from the next operation. The meeting breaks, and people file out. Outside at night, the cap-wearing commander remains behind, thinking about how quickly Shinji has become central to every supernatural crisis. Shinji finally gets a morning at home after the banquet. The dark-haired woman sits with a laptop already working through incident reports. Shinji shows her the small red bird still refusing to leave him alone. The creature sits in his hand without showing any corrupted energy. She examines it with open curiosity. Her fingers move across the keyboard as she checks available mutation data. Shinji gets increasingly dramatic about everyone treating his apartment like a research lab. Yue joins the conversation. The dark-haired woman makes a teasing comment at Shinji's expense. Yue leans in to inspect the bird too. Shinji looks like he is losing control of his own house by the second. The dark-haired woman eventually asks him for a serious favor. Her expression changes enough to wipe away the jokes. Yue adds new information from the association. Shinji facepalms when he realizes another political meeting is involved. The quiet home scene ends and the city machinery starts again. At headquarters, a huge board meeting is already underway. Officers and officials fill the room. A senior decorated man argues for stricter control of Awaken operations. A civilian researcher answers from the opposite side. A round-faced official brings up casualties and public panic. The decorated officer loses patience. Another administrator tries calming the table. The round-faced man looks completely overwhelmed by the argument. Then the association chairman arrives and changes the room's balance. A tall military officer stares him down. One older official starts sweating before either man speaks. Chairman Liu states the association's position clearly. The opposing side objects immediately. He answers without backing down. Several officials start choosing sides. Another man raises concerns about Shinji specifically. The meeting turns into overlapping accusations. Chairman Liu explains that no organization currently understands spiritual threats well enough to monopolize them. One round-faced official jumps up to challenge the point. The room erupts again. Chairman Liu responds with a cold smile instead of raising his voice. A younger observer asks what happens if awakened people refuse all oversight. The decorated officer uses the question to push military authority again. Several departments leave with completely different interpretations of the same decision. One military officer returns to his own building still furious about how much influence awakened civilians now have. The meeting finally ends without resolving nearly enough. That night, something completely different happens inside a military building. Golden lightning and flames suddenly ignite around one officer. He grabs his head as the power surges through his body. A senior official nearby watches in shock. The man becomes wrapped in yellow energy stronger than anything he has shown before. Then one golden eye opens through the glow, marking another powerful awakening, entering an already unstable world. Shinji arrives at a wealthy residence for a meeting that's supposed to be quieter than the last military briefing. He sits on an ornate sofa reading while waiting for the host. Footsteps finally approach from the hall. Shinji looks up and asks whether anyone actually lives in this enormous place. A mature woman enters with the calm confidence of someone used to being obeyed. Her glasses and professional tone make the conversation feel like an interview immediately. Shinji recognizes that she is evaluating him before introductions are even finished. She gives her name and explains why she wanted to meet. They sit across from each other and begin discussing their recent awakened incidents. Neither side wastes much time with small talk. The woman scrutinizes Shinji's answers for inconsistencies. Her expression barely changes. Shinji smiles and lets her keep testing. She hands him a file connected to the corruption cases. His senses catch a flash of hostility or spiritual pressure in the room. The woman remains perfectly calm. Shinji answers another question without showing he noticed. She studies him more carefully after that. He pulls one page from the file and focuses on a specific location. A dark purple-haired girl enters carrying another folder while the discussion continues. Shinji keeps reading instead of reacting to the interruption. The older woman confers briefly with her. Elsewhere in the residence, the silver-haired and purple-haired girls peek toward the room. Shinji notices them and immediately knows privacy is gone. He heads to the kitchen for a drink when the meeting pauses. The purple-haired girl follows and asks what he thinks of the file. Yue listens from nearby. Shinji says the pattern looks less like random outbreaks every time he studies it. Later, Yue makes a call from another room. The two girls review the documents together. She reads one section again and becomes serious. Shinji returns and sees their mood has changed. His eyes narrow at the same line they found. That night, he steps onto the balcony when his phone rings. A military contact says a new emergency may be connected to the listed location. Shinji opens the map and checks the details. He tells the caller he can move immediately. Inside, the women are finally resting. Shinji looks back toward the room, not wanting to drag them into another late-night fight. Moonlight covers the residence while he makes the decision. He turns from the balcony and heads for the exit. For a moment, a white-haired silhouette or memory flashes through his mind. Shinji stops at the doorway and checks the document one last time. The target location matches the suspicious pattern too closely. He raises the phone and confirms he is coming. One of the girls remains asleep, unaware he is leaving. He closes the door quietly behind him so the sleeping women never hear him leave. Shinji steps into the night prepared for another mission. A black SUV pulls up outside a busy campus the next day. Shinji steps out and immediately attracts more attention than he wanted. People start asking whether the rumors about his recent fights are true. He walks through the crowd in a black coat while soldiers create space. More students gather around the entrance. Security personnel push the crowd behind temporary barriers. Several people cheer when they recognize Shinji from the public footage. The purple-haired woman nearby looks deeply unimpressed by how much he is enjoying none of this. Shinji addresses the crowd just long enough to stop everyone from following him inside. The cap-wearing officer explains that the military and association are screening potential awakened recruits. A dark-haired young woman watches from the side. Shinji scans the group for unusual spiritual signatures. His eyes stop on one candidate. The cap-wearing officer notices the same reaction. Soldiers form a corridor toward the building. A huge group of applicants waits beyond them. Chairman Liu arrives carrying files and waves Shinji over. They enter the campus facility together. Chairman Liu gestures toward the evaluation rooms. Shinji listens while he explains the plan. Chairman Liu says they need people who can grow fast, not just people who already show flashy powers. Shinji sets his own condition before agreeing to help. Chairman Liu narrows his eyes. Shinji sits near a laptop and starts reviewing profiles. The older man looks amused by how quickly Shinji takes the job seriously. Then his expression turns more careful. He explains why several candidates were flagged by unusual readings. The next group is called onto the field. Chairman Liu addresses everyone and explains the basics of the evaluation. A Kaori helps organize the lines. The silver-haired and purple-haired women stand among the observers. Candidates begin moving through the first tests. A green-shirted young man sits farther back looking completely relaxed. Shinji approaches him instead of the obvious top scorers. The boy jokes about finally getting attention from the famous cultivator. Shinji smiles because the reaction tells him confidence isn't the problem here. Another recruit joins their conversation. The green-shirted candidate points toward the testing area. Several people laugh at whatever he says next. Then his expression turns serious when Shinji asks about his awakening. The boy stands and faces him directly. The dark-haired and silver-haired women notice the exchange. Shinji returns to them with the candidate still nearby. The group starts moving toward the next stage. The green-shirted boy turns to say something to the purple-haired woman. She dismisses him with one look. Shinji talks quietly with the dark-haired girl. Yue adds her own observation. A crowd gathers around the green-shirted recruit after his performance draws attention. He looks suddenly much less relaxed about being popular. Then, a red-black eye opens in the shadows beyond the field. The cap-wearing officer feels the hostile pressure and turns. Shinji notices his reaction. Soldiers begin moving toward the outer fence. The candidates are ordered back from the edge. Shinji gathers energy and tells the evaluators the test may have just become real. The team's next mission throws them into a volcanic field covered in rivers of lava. A huge black rift opens overhead and drops several fighters into the area at once. A massive golden bird lands beyond them with enough force to shake the ground. Its eyes lock onto the group immediately. Everyone spreads out across the safer rock between lava flows. Shinji checks that Yue landed safely. She moves beside him while the rest of the team gathers. The bird releases a flame illusion and dives across the field. The dark-haired woman ducks under the burning wing. The group runs before the fire can cut off their escape. A wide flame tears through the path behind them. Shinji shouts for everyone to keep moving. One male fighter is already injured when they reach temporary cover. Shinji looks back at the creature and realizes it is hurting them. Another fire projectile crashes near the shelter. His eyes narrow as the pattern becomes obvious. The green-shirted recruit releases flames of his own. The purple-haired woman watches the clash carefully. Shinji tells the group the bird is testing which of them can resist fire. They reach a cave-like shelter away from the open lava. The red-haired man strengthens his flame aura. Shinji faces him and warns not to burn through his stamina yet. The full party gathers and prepares to move deeper. A darker spiritual pressure waits inside the volcanic tunnel. The red-haired fighter takes point for a moment. Everyone advances through the narrow path. Yue notices the temperature rising again. The group closes formation. Shinji and the green-shirted boy exchange a quick plan. The tunnel opens into another canyon. A tall red guardian-like monster stands in their path. A barrier of red energy forms around it. The creature reveals a dragon-like attack pattern. A red slash forces the team apart. Everyone dives away from the impact. The guardian forms a burning spear. Another fireball follows before they can reset. The monster advances through its own flames. A huge wave of heat floods the canyon. An orange orb condenses in front of it. The red-haired fighter tries to block with his own flame. The guardian simply overpowers him. Shinji throws up an ice-blue wall using the team's combined elemental control. The explosion crashes against the barrier. Shinji stands behind it without losing focus. The other fighters are stunned that he countered fire with a technique outside his usual style. A blue ice blast follows the opening. The monster answers with a burning punch. Shinji dodges before the impact reaches him. Blue energy shields the nearby teammates. The guardian jumps through the broken barrier. Shinji intercepts with a slash. An orange explosion swallows both fighters. The group watches for movement inside the smoke. Shinji walks out first. The team checks the wounded and starts moving again. They cross another section of lava-covered ground. The volcanic path narrows again as the team approaches a colder blue-lit opening ahead. Shinji warns everyone not to relax, because the strongest spiritual pressure is still farther ahead. Shinji and the red-haired fighter reach the next volcanic chamber together. The red-haired man insists that fire is still the best answer in a place like this. Flames explode around his body. Black-orange energy answers from the monster ahead. The rest of the team takes position behind them. The red-haired fighter's eyes sharpen with determination. He laughs and charges before Shinji can finish warning him. A fire monster rises directly from the lava. The fighter forms an orange blade. His first strike hits the creature and barely changes its stance. The monster turns toward him at close range. Sweat appears on his face when he realizes the heat difference. A giant fire column erupts beneath him. The creature attacks through the flames. Shinji watches for the moment the monster exposes its core. The dark look on his face tells the others this is stronger than the last guardian. The red-haired fighter gets swallowed by another burst. Shinji's eyes snap toward him. A sphere of flame closes around the impact point. Shinji charges in before it can detonate again. A massive fire attack crashes between them. The red-haired man screams as he gets thrown clear. The monster stomps forward. The purple-haired and dark-haired women call out that the injured fighter is still alive. Shinji steps between him and the creature. The nearby team retreats with the wounded. The monster covers itself in another layer of flame. Shinji stays completely calm. A huge orange swirl builds around the creature's body. It advances through the heat. Shinji draws his red weapon and adds blue lightning. The red-haired fighter lies wounded behind him. Shinji launches into the monster with a lightning-assisted tackle. The creature answers with its burning body. Shinji forces a line through the flames. The injured fighter manages to look up. A red-blue weapon clash explodes at the center. Fire and lightning wrap around Shinji at once. One ally watches the pressure spike. The rest of the group can barely see through the heat. A huge cross-shaped slash cuts the chamber. The monster finally takes a deep wound. Its fiery core becomes visible. Shinji follows before the opening closes. The next slash lands directly through the center. The fire monster explodes outward. Shinji remains standing when the flames collapse. He turns immediately toward the wounded red-haired fighter. The man is still conscious, but badly hurt. Shinji orders the others to begin treatment before they move any farther. Yue looks from the defeated monster to Shinji, realizing he is still conserving strength for whatever waits beyond the lava zone. The group gathers on the cooled edge of the lava field after the fight. The silver-haired and dark-haired women check the wounded team members. The green-shirted fighter helps move supplies and injured people. Shinji gives them a small smile when everyone is accounted for. The red-haired man rests near the remains of the defeated monster. Shinji checks one last time that nobody needs to turn back immediately. The team resumes traveling through the volcanic zone. A blue cavern finally appears beyond the lava, offering cooler air and completely different spiritual pressure. Yue studies the entrance. Shinji steps inside beside her. A military fighter follows while keeping his weapon ready. Shinji looks deeper into the cave and senses water-aligned energy. The dark-haired woman confirms movement ahead. A male ally answers from the rear of the formation. Everyone advances carefully through the blue-lit tunnel. A strange blue flame or core glows farther inside. Shinji and Yue stop to examine it. He explains that water-aligned mutants often hide their real body beneath the surrounding energy. A huge shark-like mouth suddenly erupts from the cavern water. The creature crashes toward the group. Blue energy fills the space around it. Shinji dodges the first bite. One male soldier is not as lucky and gets caught by the edge of the attack. Lightning knocks the creature away before it can drag him under. Yue draws her weapon. She attacks while Shinji pulls the wounded fighter back. The water beast twists through the strike. Another teammate lands hard against the rocks. Shinji's eyes track the current instead of the visible body. A blue water vortex begins forming around the room. The giant shark rises through the center. A cutting wave crosses the cavern. Yue leaps above it. Shinji charges blue energy in his hand. A water lightning slash hits the creature's side. The soldiers watch the beast retreat toward the darker tunnel. Then a second spiritual signature appears behind them. A green reptilian monster crawls from the shadows. Poisonous energy cracks through the ground around its claws. Yue's eyes widen. The reptile rushes before anyone can turn fully. A yellow impact knocks one fighter aside. The green beast snaps its jaws towards Shinji. Toxic energy trails behind its movement. A tail strike cuts through the formation. Shinji twists away but still gets thrown across the cave. Blue lightning forms around him as he recovers. Yue takes a glancing hit and staggers. Blood appears along the reptile's scales where her counter landed. The shark-like monster attacks again from the water. Shinji drives a blue-charged fist toward it. A huge energy collision fills the cavern. Lightning wraps around Shinji as both monsters circle. The green reptile stays on its feet, setting up the next exchange immediately. Shinji rises into the air wrapped in blue lightning while the green reptile glares up from below. The creature roars and throws its whole body forward. Poisonous energy crawls across its scales as it stalks him through the cavern. A tail slash comes first, and Shinji flips over it before the strike can catch his legs. He grabs the red sword and channels blue energy along the blade. A lightning-charged slash cuts across the reptile's neck. Shinji follows by driving the weapon into the armored back before the monster can turn. The beast thrashes underneath him, but his speed keeps him outside the claws. Blue flame-like energy pours around Shinji as he prepares the next technique. He releases a heavier burst straight into the creature's upper body. The attack takes the shape of a blue-white dragon as it tears across the cave. The reptile's face disappears inside the impact. Shinji closes in and lands another sword strike while the scales are still cracked. The monster finally rolls across the stone. Then it forces itself upright and attacks again because apparently nobody in this dungeon learned how defeat works. Shinji regroups beside Yue. He asks whether she can still fight. She is bruised and exhausted but refuses to leave him alone against two mutants. Shinji's expression turns serious when he senses another pressure building behind them. A huge blue crystalline presence appears deeper in the cavern. A wave of water-aligned energy spreads across the floor. Shinji shields the woman as the current crashes through their position. Both fighters look toward the new threat. She gasps when the full shape moves inside the blue light. Energy begins dropping from the cavern ceiling like frozen spears. The shark-like water monster charges beneath the falling attack. Shinji tells Yu to focus on surviving while he pulls the creature's attention. They take position together. Shinji grabs her and moves before the next wave can trap them. The giant blue shark erupts from the water directly below. Its mouth opens across most of their escape route. Yue freezes for half a second at the size of it. The beast launches itself toward them. Shinji cuts a blue slash across its path. He tells her he has an idea, but the timing has to be perfect. She answers that at this point she has heard that sentence enough times to be worried. Shinji settles into a lower stance and starts gathering everything into one burst. A vertical stream of lightning and water spirals around him. The aquatic monster roars and comes straight through it. Shinji lands near the edge of the cavern after the first collision. He and Yure reset back to back. Her strength finally gives out and she drops toward the ground. Shinji catches another wound while protecting her from the follow-up. He looks at the blood, then smiles because the monster has finally committed to a predictable charge. The beast rushes again. Red sword light and blue lightning merge around Shinji's final attack. Yue watches him step into the strike instead of retreating. Shinji moves her behind him one last time. A massive blue explosion swallows the charging creature. When the light clears, Shinji is still standing inside the lightning, ready for whatever this dungeon throws at them next.